Okay. Well, all right. Well, we welcome back to the Infrastructure and Economic Development Committee meeting. We did have a brief in-camera sections talk about business interests of the third party, and now we're moving on to item 2.1, Director Service Area Updates. And I'm hearing some static. Oh, and it's gone. All right. So item 2.1, Director Service Area Update, and that is Director Glavin.
Thank you, Chair Bressie. So we'll start off with economic development, the economic recovery program. To date, the committee has received 3 beautification and patio grants and 1 local marketing grant application. And applications are continuing to be received, and they're being reviewed and awarded every 2 weeks. In energy and environment, Parks has completed harvesting at the Coca-Cola Center, where we had a garden for food that generated food for the Friendship Center. So they donated 6 full garbage bags of Swiss chard, 12 pounds of radishes, 327 beets, and 350 carrots that were sent over. In engineering, we have recently posted Mount View Stormwater Management RFP, a new road rehab RFP for design, as well as 103rd Avenue Rehabilitation and Slope Repair RFP. And these are all projects that we'll be doing design now, but these won't be done until next year. Recently closed was the Playground Replacement Program for 2021, as well as the Bridge Repair and Maintenance Program for various repairs and maintenance for pedestrian and vehicle bridges. We have just awarded another road rehabilitation tender, as well as traffic signal upgrades for 132nd Avenue and 100th Street. As well, we have awarded the trail program tender for some trails in Mission Heights, Patterson, and Crystal Lake Estates. And as far as new construction, we have recently started up construction on 99th Avenue, where we'll be doing a mill and fill from 105th Street to 98th Street. They're currently ripping out the sidewalk along 99th, as well as 108th Street from 84th Avenue to 89th. We are doing an overlay in there, as well as a storm system upgrade. And they currently have only 1 lane traveling southbound, and then the northbound traffic's currently being detoured, and that should be done here as far as the detouring within the next week or so. And the project's expected to be done before the end of the year. As well, we have just started construction in Crystal Ridge.
Great. Thank you for the update. Are there...
Oh, sorry, I was just scrolling down into transportation. In transportation engineering, we are doing some timing coordination and testing along 100th Avenue from Staples to the airport with full implementation expected next week, and that's just some improvements for traffic flow. And in parks, we are doing a small sponsored planting of native trees and shrubs along 116th Street, south of 84th Avenue. And for this fall, we are doing some rink site leveling, turf fertilization, and completing our noxious weed program, and that's my report.
Great, thank you. I see Councillor Clayton with a question, and then Councillor Thiessen.
Thanks, Chair Bressie.
With 10 questions.
Director Glavin, can you tell me, if you don't know, it's fine, just for the next meeting, I'm curious how we did with our street cleaning this summer. Did we get the entire city done? I know that there was earlier discussion in the year that it could be done with the 4 pieces of equipment that we have, could be done twice in a year, and I'm just wondering if you know how the program went this year.
I can give you kind of a rough overview how it went. We were done our first pass of the city late June, I think around June 25th. And then after that, it was kind of spot cleaning. We continue to do the arterial roads year round. I believe we got our collectors done a second time as well. And as far as I know, we had pretty good uptime this year with our units. There was some, we rebuilt 2 of the sweepers last winter, so to get them into like new condition, more or less. So they they functioned a lot better this year, and Fleet has done a good job of keeping our equipment running. So to my knowledge, things have went fairly well. I know that we still get the odd complaint of a missed road here or there, which when we learn about those, that we do go fix those conditions and make sure that we get them swept up.
Just to follow up, Director Glavin, so then is street cleaning done for the year? Can you tell me?
No, we'll likely continue until it starts to snow.
Great. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you, Chair Bressie. Director Glavin, it's that time of year again where kids are going back to school and parents are, a lot of them are driving their kids to school. Over the past week, I've received a couple phone calls and in-person requests on John Paul II, JP2 school, and turning left on 132nd Avenue onto that road. I guess my question is, where are we in regards to traffic lights or a safety plan for this school? Is that coming up in this next budget to be deliberated on, or where are we with that? I know we've had some discussion about the JP2 area, but.
Thanks, Chair Bressie. As far as additional work at JP2, there's none currently scheduled. We have addressed some of the concerns that the Catholic School Board brought to us around pedestrian crossings along 132nd, as well as completing the trail, which we have budgeted and I believe completed most of that work already. The traffic signals, as far as being warranted or not at that intersection, would not meet our current test. As this intersection, although not the same, would be similar to what we saw at in Crystal Lake onto 132nd, where they have a couple peak times during the day that dissipate fairly quickly. So it's not a condition that they're under for, the majority of the day. It's, a half hour at a time, which would not warrant us budgeting $300,000 to put a new set of lights there. So as of right now, I'm not aware of any other improvements that we have planned at that intersection into JP2. I know that I think this is the first year that they're at full capacity, where they have all grades there. And they also did move their bus transfer station there from the Catholic high school on the south end to the north end, which is adding additional traffic into that school site.
So just a question, although now this is the same answer I've given to people, that I don't feel like lights are warranted there, except perhaps during school hours. Has administration put any thought or consideration into perhaps putting up school zone signs on that road? I know it would slow traffic down, but and I say this mainly not for pedestrian safety, but for vehicular safety. As vehicles are turning left, a lot of times people are trying to rush through after being in a long lineup of cars picking up their kids, and turning left on 132nd at those peak times can be very difficult and sometimes can stress out drivers to the point that they make poor decisions in turning left. And the potential for accidents are there. Have we put in any consideration as to maybe slowing the speed limit down in front of that school and giving drivers that warning during peak times?
So this is one of the stretches of road that we recently did do analysis on as part of the traffic bylaw when we brought forward the recommendations on decreasing and increasing speed limits around the city. Through the work that was done under that and that assessment, they did not find that it warranted a speed limit change. And as far as the school zone signs, no, they haven't been contemplated, and that would be due to the setback of the school from the road. It's quite a long ways from 132nd.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Director Glavin? In that case, we can move on to our next agenda item. Mr. Tobin, thank you for being patient with us. I'll hand it over to you for a presentation on some proposed variances.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just trying to set up the not sure if you have it there. Trying to share my screen here. Just one second, please.
We can see your screen now.
Oh, thank you. So the city, good morning, Mr. Chairman, all committee members and guests at the Zoom meeting. Administration have received a development permit application, PL 200-334, for the construction of 2 multi-attached dwellings with proposed variances. The subject property is located at the intersection of 93rd Street here and Juneau Crossing, which is 94th Ave, as well as 94th Ave and Park Road. It is surrounded by residential subdivisions to the southeast, the east, the northeast, north, and northwest. There's vacant land further to the northwest, and also a sports field to the north. There's industrial properties across Park Road and a railway further to the west, the southwest, the south, and the southeast. The applicant is proposing to construct 2 multi-attached dwellings. There will be 18 one-bedroom units, 10 two-bedroom units, and 8 three-bedroom units. The property's been addressed as follows. The 2 buildings, one is 9402 93rd Street, which is proposed to contain 20 units, and 9414 93rd Street, which is proposed to contain 16 units for a total of 36 units. Some site photos for you. This is sitting on the site itself, in the middle of the site, roughly looking east to other multi-attached dwellings, looking southeast rather, looking east to another multi-attached dwelling that was approved there, northeast to a residential, northwest to a duplex. Like I say, this is standing in the middle of the property. This is looking west. There's some trees, some buffering there. Southwest, you can see the commercial development. This is standing across 93rd Street, looking south-southeast. This is across 94 Avenue, Juneau Crossing, looking at the property itself. I mean, we got to visualize that it's a blank property right now. This is the intersection of Juneau Crossing and Park Road, looking at what, how the property would look if it's so close. This is Park Road southeast, pretty well where the first building would go. This is Park Road northwest, looking northeast, and where the property, where the second building would go. So, the applicant's proposing to construct with the following variants. They want to they're requesting that the front yard be reduced from 6.1 meters to 5.5 meters, which is a variance of 9.8%. Basically, 0.6 meters less than what is required, or 1 foot 11. And this is where facing the front building, facing Juneau Crossing or 94th Ave. The rear yard, there's also a reduced rear yard setback, which faces that duplex that we just mentioned. And they're looking at 7.6 meters is the requirement. They want it reduced to 7.2 meters, which is a 5.3% variance. 0.4 meters or 1 foot 4 inches. The reduced side yard setback is only for the front building, 9402 93rd Street only. As you can see, the building to the rear here, I don't know if you can see it because of the size, but it meets the land use bylaw requirement. We're talking about the side yard here on this building, less 43.3%. It would be, it's required to be 3 meters. They're proposing 1.7 meters, so a 43.3% variance, and approximately 1.3 meters less than the requirement, or 4 feet 4 inches. As I indicated, the building to the rear, the second building meets. Due to the size of the buildings, they were looking at reduced landscape area, and it's partially because there is a utility easement to the front here on 93rd Street, which required them to push their buildings back, and there is a sanitary sewer to the rear of this building that they had to accommodate for. So they're looking at reducing from 1,219 square meters, which is requirement, to 896 square meters, so less 323 meters squared, or 26.5%. And finally, they're looking at increasing the maximum density from 94 units per hectare to 103 units per hectare, which is an increase of 10%. Basically, they're looking at putting in an increase of everything else is a reduction. In this case, we're looking at 9 units per hectare more than the requirement. The Infrastructure and Economic Development Committee is the variance authority for increases in the maximum density between 0.0 and 10.0%, and all other variances as proposed. In actual fact, the variance they're proposing is 9.988%, so you're looking at around 10%. Had it been 10.1, we'd have to go to council for approval. The request relates to the council strategic plan. It meets 2 of the council strategic objectives, community and infrastructure, as indicated in the report. For community, the result definition delivers programs and services that meets the needs of the community and individuals by promoting healthy diversity, inclusiveness, and wellness. The applicant is proposing 36 units, as I indicated, 18 one-bedroom. There'll be family and multi-family in it, because there's 3 bedrooms, 8 3-bedroom apartments, 10 2-bedrooms. As well as the infrastructure, the definition acts as a catalyst for the provision of affordable and supporting housing alternatives that meets the demand of the community. For environmental impact, there are no environmental impacts associated with this specific development. Economic development, approval of this application will provide needed construction jobs in these difficult times in the city, and the developer will purchase materials from local businesses. Therefore, this development will have a positive impact on the local economy. The social impact, I'll let the applicant speak to this when they have their chance, but approval of this application could provide much needed senior family and or affordable housing to the general public. The property itself is located in a medium residential RM district. It's a multi-attached dwelling, is listed as a permitted use, and the project is listed as a permitted use. The municipal development plan indicates and assigns the property as residential medium density with residential surrounding and industrial to the southeast, as indicated on the attached land use bylaw map. So the proposed development is in keeping with the intent of the municipal development plan. A multi-attached dwelling is defined as follows, as indicated in your report, Mr. Chairman. Means a residential building containing 3 or more dwelling units separated by common walls and located either on a single site or a separate unit individual lot, each dwelling unit having at least 1 separate entrance. This definition applies in forms of housing that include but are not limited to townhouses, street-orientated townhouses, row houses, triplexes, and fourplexes. The purpose of the medium residential district is to provide for medium density in the form of multi-family townhouse units and low-rise apartment buildings on a single site with a minimum density of 34 units per hectare and a maximum density of 94 units per hectare. The applicant is proposing to increase in the maximum density, as we indicated, of 94 units to 103, so increase by 9 and leads to a 10% variance. Basically, if we were looking at 32 units, you'd have a 91.9 unit or 92 unit per hectare, so less than 94 and no variance. 33 units would be 94.57 and a 0.7% variance. So you could put 33 units on this lot. You'd have to still go to committee, but 32 units would be required. So the applicant is asking to increase by 4 units only, and they're asking to increase to the building to the front of 94th Avenue, Juneau Crossing. The front yard and rear yard setbacks are less than 10%, so they're minimal. And if we were looking at just those, they would not trigger the circulation process. The reduced side yard is required because they're adding those 4 units to the front building. That's the one at 9402 93rd Street. It will have no impact on neighbors because this building is the one closest to Juneau Crossing, and the reduced side yard setback is toward a ditch along the Park Road right away. The other building, as I indicated, 9414 93rd Street, meets the minimum side yard requirement. So Basically, because it's having 20 units, the building is bigger than the other building that has 16 units. The reduced landscaping, to make up for the reduced landscaping, because of the number of units, there was a lot of parking, as you could see by the site plan that we looked at previously, and it's attached to your report. So they're looking at adding more trees. They've indicated 4 more trees and 7 more shrubs, but the applicant is certainly adaptable to adding more if the committee deems more are required. So administration is satisfied that use meets the intent of the definition, the purpose of the district, and the proposed development meets all other requirements of the land use bylaw. The risk, there is no risk to the adjacent property owners. You're looking at residential compared to residential. And as you can see by this drawing, we have residential high density to the northwest, which means you could put a 12-story apartment building here, a permitted use. We're only two units away, and it's within the land use bylaw, the height of the building. Stakeholder engagement, a total of 16 notices were sent out to adjacent properties that we deemed would be affected, the adjacent directly to the development. The development here is where the Star is located. This is the commercial industrial development, and these are the residential. This is the vacant RM district that I mentioned earlier. We had 1 letter of objection and 2 letters of support. The objector is indicated in the report, and you can read the report. They're mostly concerned that increase in density. If you reduce the variances, you will increase the density, and how that will impact on their development and the railway, the noise, the dust, whatever. But we go back to the fact that it is a permitted use in the district. Can the site support it? Well, the site coverage for a multi-attached dwelling is 45%, and they only have 20% lot coverage, so they could make the buildings even bigger. That's not their intent. Their intent is to meet what they need for the economy. It will have no impact on the reduced neighbors, as I said, and there are no risks. So the stakeholder engagement, we notified the 5 that we had the budget. Administration also circulated to various internal departments and external government agencies. No concerns or objections are received to the proposed development. The lone objector indicates himself that the property is zoned residential medium density, but they think is not suited to go there. In addition, the Northwest, as I indicated, is our RH district. So summary conclusion, the applicant is proposing to increase the maximum density of 94 units per hectare to 103 units, which result in a 10% variance. Therefore, the Infrastructure and Economic Development Committee is the variance authority when we're looking at an increase to the density from the 0.0 to 10%. And all other variances as proposed then becomes the approval of the Infrastructure and Economic Development Committee. Administrator is satisfied that the development permit application is consistent with the municipal development plan, the intent of the definition, and the purpose of the district. It meets all other requirements of land use bylaw 1260 for the height of the building, both buildings, parking, etc. As proposed variances will have minimal impact on adjacent property. Therefore, it is recommended, this actual slide is looking at the building if you look at it from across Juneau Crossing, 94 Avenue. This is what they will see. This is the 20-unit building. Administration recommends to the Infrastructure and Economic Development Committee that development permit PL 20034 be approved with proposed variances to the maximum density, the required landscaped area, and the front, rear, and side yard setback as per the attached draft development permit. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Great. Thank you for that presentation. I see Councillor Clayton wanted to ask a question before. Just a couple procedural questions, one for Mr. Tobin, and then I'll have one for probably Ms. Van Beekveld about people who might be speaking to this. But Mr. Tobin, this is, whatever decision is made here is appealable to the SDAB, correct?
Correct.
Great. And then Ms. Van Beekveld, I see some other extra people in this call. Were there any people hoping to speak to or against this application?
Thank you, Chair Bessie. I didn't get any requests to speak.
Yeah, I think there is some people who would like to speak for it and probably against it. I see David Pallant was online there. I don't know if he's still in the meeting.
Great. Well, maybe what I'll ask is, my apologies, everybody. I probably should have asked this before, but yes, if you're hoping to speak to it, maybe pop on your camera and let me know if you're hoping, for now, just let me know if you're hoping to speak for or against this, and then I'll figure out the order you folks can go in. So, Miss Aiken, are you hoping to speak for or against this?
Or I'm speaking on behalf of Visionary Concepts.
Great. And then, Mr. Plant, are you hoping to speak for or against this?
Depending on the questions that may come forward, I am speaking for the project and potentially answering some of those questions.
Great. Thank you. And is there anybody else on the call who's hoping to speak either for or against this? Great. And then, Ms. Aiken, is Mr. Plant kind of the same delegation as you? Is he with you, or?
Yes, we're both with Visionary Concepts.
Great. Awesome. So what I'm going to do is, Ms. Aiken, I'll give you a chance to speak in a minute. What I'm going to ask council to do is, just because this is a decision that is appealable, I'm going to be a little bit more formal here than we usually are. And so if you've got questions for Mr. Tobin, please feel free to ask questions now. I'll ask us to save our opinions and save any actual debate on the matter until we've heard from Ms. Aiken and Mr. Plant, and we've asked all the questions we might ask. So, Councillor Clayton, was there still a question you were hoping to ask?
Yeah, thanks, Chair Brescia. I have a question, but I'll wait till the delegation's done. Thanks.
Great. Any other questions for Mr. Tobin?
Not at this time.
Great. And then, Ms. Aiken, were you hoping to speak to it, or are you just available if we've got questions?
I prepared a short presentation just to discuss the context in which we decided to build this building and also touch on the variances. Great. Yeah, please share with us what you've got. Okay. Good morning to everyone in the committee. Thank you for having me here today. So the context that we're working in is meeting community needs and providing an economic benefit to the city. So our goals of this project is to provide an affordable housing option for seniors, single people, and families. We're providing new housing in good condition with independent entry and compact, well laid out suites, including 4 appliances. We're providing economic benefit to the city with a large residential construction project during a time of downturn in the industry. So one of the things that we were considering was the population growth of Grande Prairie and the low number of housing starts, especially multifamily development. And we felt this provided a good justification for the variances that we're requesting. So we looked at the Alberta government's population projection in Grande Prairie, and they expect the region to experience the strongest growth in the province. And this is from 2018 to 2046, they were projecting. Outside of the Edmonton-Calgary corridor. The region is described as a service center for Alberta and British Columbia with diversified service and natural resources economy. In addition, the opening of the new regional hospital and cancer care center, a college with collaborative degree programs and training programs, and the planned $2 billion methanol plant demonstrate that Grande Prairie continues its development as a regional hub and an attractive community for workers and families. And of course, some of this has been impacted across the country with the COVID-19 pandemic. But if we look historically, according to data from Statistics Canada, growth in the population of Grande Prairie has been consistently higher than the average for the entire country, even during periods of downturn. So we also looked at data from inspection services, permit statistics, and building permits new construction monthly reports at housing starts and multifamily development. And there's been a decline in new residential construction, with housing starts in general having declined since 2014. So they've accelerated in the last year because of the current situation, but this has been an ongoing trend. And if we look at the map, there's been a massive drop in single-family housing from permits issued by August 2020 compared to August 2019, and that was 67 this year as opposed to 160 in the previous year. Multifamily has not changed much because of the already low starts. It's continued to be low, and by August 2020, there were 14 permits, but 8 of these permits were for the 8-plex that Visionary Concepts just built. So we're really one of the only companies that are developing multifamily housing in Grande Prairie. In 2009, if we compare it just for a more normal year, there was only 10 building permits issued for multifamily construction. And one of those permits was actually the foundation permit for the 8-plex again. And in 2018, there were only 8 for a total of 19 units. And as of August 2020, the building permits issued overall are down 26%. So in this context, a project of this size has real economic value for the city. And while the population continues to increase, the number of multifamily housing developments remains low, even though 35% of households in Grande Prairie are renters. And once the economy picks up again and the city continues to grow, there's a risk of growth outpacing the available housing, because construction projects of this size take time to develop. And without medium and higher density developments, other issues such as urban sprawl become apparent, which I'm sure everybody's aware. According to the housing needs assessment that was conducted by the city, lower income people and families are at a disadvantage in the existing rental market, including competition with higher income people and industry workers. And our 36-unit project is specifically targeting lower income people, seniors, lone person households, and families to help meet this need. According to the community needs assessment, approximately 20% of the households in Grande Prairie are in housing that is not affordable, which is defined as no more than 30% of your income going to shelter, and that includes utilities. And we're not able to offer social housing of this sort, which is based on income without subsidies, which we're open to looking at, but we're providing a middle-of-the-road, more affordable option for individual seniors and families that are having difficulty meeting the market rates and can benefit greatly from a reduction in rent. So we're looking at a mixed model. We're applying for financing under the CMHC low-income housing program to be able to provide rental suites at 10 to 20% under market prices. The exact breakdown will be determined by CMHC, but similar projects have resulted in all suites being under 10% market rate, or a mix of market rate and suites under 20% under market. So an extra 10 to 20% means money for basic needs such as groceries or clothing, but can also free up money to put away for a down payment on a home, which is a barrier for many renters because they're paying more than they can currently afford. According to the needs assessment, one-person households represent the largest segment of the population in housing needs. So with this in mind, we've planned 18 compact, but well laid out one-bedroom suites with an independent entry dishwasher and washer-dryer. For family housing, including single-parent households, we've designed the remaining suites as 2 and 3 bedrooms. So we're also interested in a partnership approach. So we've been exploring opportunities to partner with community organizations in the city, including the Grande Prairie Foundation. We've been discussing this project to understand and meet those community needs for the much-needed low-income and family housing. We're open to providing a designated number of social housing suites, and that would be the income-based, based on 30% of income, if there's city support provided through rental subsidy or other incentives that make our cost feasible, because, of course, we have the cost reality as well. When we're looking at 30%, that could end up being $500 a month, depending on the income. So we have just costs we need to cover, but we're open to discussing that as a possibility. So some of the challenges in multifamily construction in general, and this was all highlighted in the city community needs assessment, is the volatility in local economy and the rental market, the availability of large lots within the city to develop, and existing zoning with extremely limited high-density residential in particular. There's also some differences in bylaw requirements between types of multifamily development. So, for example, apartments and row houses. So there's less landscaping requirements for apartments, even though the number of the suites are the same. So that's where our variance comes in, whereas if we would have built an apartment, we wouldn't have that variance. So these factors, these all factors for our decision to pursue the current development plan and application for approval for these variances. We've worked with the city development every step of the way to ensure there is support for the project. Our project is constrained by the size of the lot, the location of utility right-of-way, and economic feasibility for a large-scale rental development. One of our strategies for mitigating these risks that come with multifamily development is to maximize the number of units and overall footprint of the building on the property, which has led to variances. We've considered revisions, including a reduction in the number of units from our original plan of 48 suites and we're now proposing 36 suites. Reducing the number of units further puts the project feasibility into question. Our original design for the site had no variance to the side yard. However, we had no option but to shift the building due to the utility right-of-way on the edge of the property, which complicated the site servicing, and we already had to reduce the size of one of the buildings to accommodate that. We're unable to reduce the size of the building further since the suites are already compact. The size and shape of the lot and single access points to sanitary connections at one corner of the lot, and the required parking prevents us from further altering the size, shape, or location of the building. The largest variance is to one side yard, and there are no neighbors. That's city-owned land, as Mr. Tobin had pointed out. The building footprint also requires a variance for landscape area for these reasons. We mentioned there's a difference in the landscaping requirements between apartments and other type of multifamily developments, and what we're requesting is still higher than an apartment building with the same number of units, what it would require. We felt it was more beneficial to have additional much-needed suites than a few extra feet of grass. We're also concerned about curb appeal and providing an attractive property, and will provide upgraded landscape in the form of additional trees and shrubs beyond the minimum required. There's also a large green space, Rotary Park being only a 5-minute walk for play and for outdoor recreation for the residents. This property and adjacent lots along Part Road are zone medium density residential. We do have a small variance to density. However, it is worth noting that the high density residential is nearly adjacent to our property, as is pointed out. Therefore, our project will not be out of character with the rest of the neighborhood or future development plans. So just to sum up, the rate of construction for new multifamily developments continues to lag the rate of growth. There's a real need for good quality and more affordable housing options for seniors, single families, single people and families. We're interested in a partnership approach and in pursuing funding to allow for below market rental rates. And we're providing economic benefit to the city with a large residential construction project during a period of downturn in the industry. For these reasons, we ask the committee to approve the variances in density and landscaping and the side yards as described. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Are there any questions for Ms. Aiken? I'm not seeing any, so I see Mr. Plant's the same room as you, but I just want to give him a chance to speak too if he wished to. So Mr. Plant, would you like to speak as well, or are you just here in case we had questions? We can hear you through Ms. Aiken's microphone.
Okay, sure. So no, I'm fine. I think the presentation basically says everything we need to do. I think the city, presentation from the development side has also showed the need for it. And so if there's any questions later on, please feel free to ask them. And other than that, I'm good. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. So just looking around and just one last call. Any questions? Great. Well, Ms. Aiken, Mr. Plant, thank you very much. Appreciate you being here. You're welcome to stay on the call and listen. I just ask you to turn off your cameras and microphones just to kind of leave the table, so to speak. And then I just want to give one more call. I see a few other people on the call who aren't members of our administration, so I just want to give one more chance. If anybody's hoping to speak for or against this, if you could just turn on your camera or turn on your microphone and let me know that you're here. Okay, I don't see anybody. And Mr. Plant, your camera's still on, so if you could just turn off your camera, we'd appreciate that. Thank you very much. And then I'll give committee one more chance to ask administration questions. Like I said, I want to be a little bit more formal since this is appealable. So if you've got questions, now is kind of the time to ask them. After this, I'll probably only let you ask procedural questions. So are there any other questions for administration? Excellent. And with that, Mr. Tobin, I'd ask you just turn off your camera as well as we debate this, and we'll ask you back if we do have some procedural questions. But looking at committee, is anybody willing to make a motion, or does anybody have any conversation or debate? Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Chair Bressie. I would move that the Infrastructure and Economic Development Committee approve development permit PL 200334 for the construction of 2 multi-attached dwellings at 9402 and 9414 93rd Street, with the proposed variances for the following reasons. 1, the proposed use meets the intent of the municipal development plan, and 2, the proposed development meets all the other requirements of land use bylaw C-1260. Just speaking to this motion, I don't know if I need to add anything more that our administration or the delegation haven't already presented. but we are, the way we plan this site or around this site, I guess to the north of the site, essentially is to create more affordable housing options for seniors and family. And it's really refreshing and really great to see, the community coming together, the development community coming and putting together a project such as this. The site's a bit constrained, but not too constrained for my liking. And so for all those reasons, I would encourage committee to support this motion, and we'll move this project forward. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. I can't make motions as a chair, but Councillor Thiessen, I'm wondering if you'd be open to a friendly amendment, and that is adding one more reason to justify this. And the language, which I've taken straight out of the Municipal Government Act, is because the variances will not materially interfere with or affect the use, enjoyment, or value of neighboring parcels of land. And just why I think that amendment is important is there's kind of two big reasons why you can appeal to the SDAB is because it doesn't meet the plans we've got, and the reasons the administration provided hit that, but also you can appeal to the SDAB and say, hey, these variances, they hurt my property and they hurt my enjoyment of the land, and that's something the SDAB can consider. So I think it's important for us as a committee to say if we don't feel that this will interfere with neighboring properties.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Bressie. I can definitely add and amend that. My concern level on it, though, is fairly low. Looking at the height of the buildings and what is being proposed here, I don't think we're going to create any shade or sun blockage with a lot of these things. But I totally get it. If someone wants to appeal, they can appeal. So I didn't capture all the wording. I'm going to hope that Amanda did, but I will amend to add that as point 3.
Great. Well, let me read that one more time. And again, it's just straight out of the MGA. It's because proposed development does not materially interfere with or affect the use, enjoyment, or value of neighboring parcels of land.
Yep, 100%. Thank you, Dylan.
Great. Is there any conversation or debate? Councillor Clayton.
Thanks. I wanted to wait till the delegations were done, but question for administration. In regards to the feedback that we received from one individual, I was wondering if either the applicant or administration had any follow-up discussion with the adjacent property owner that is in objection to the project.
Mr. Tobin?
Yeah, just 1 second. I can't figure this out.
We can hear you, Mr. Tobin, and see you.
Oh, sorry. Through the chair, Councillor Clayton. We did notify the adjacent property owner. They did not get back to me on what they felt. They felt it would be foolish to put it there, the 32 units, as you could see by their comments. It's all a residential district out there in that area of Juno Estates. It's directly across from commercial and a rail bed, unfortunately. There will be noise with it, but it is an RM district. There is RH, and I explained that to the applicant. They were invited to this meeting, or as far as I know they were, and I let them know there was a meeting. So I'm assuming they may or may not, I'm assuming they might appeal this decision to the SDAB. I don't know that for sure.
Great, thank you. Councillor Clayton?
Thank you. I'm generally in support of this motion. My biggest concern on it is the landscaping reduction. The 25% landscaping reduction is a concern to me when potentially there is possibility of there being concerns with an industrial property across the street. So I know that administration had said that there was possibility of the applicant looking at ways to improve this and potentially reduce the percentage, the 25% in the deficiency in landscaping. So I guess, I'm a little, if the applicant has any comments on that, I'd appreciate them, but that's my biggest concern at this point.
I think that it's, sorry, like I said, I'm just trying to be a little bit more formal with this in case it does get appealed. So I think we heard from the applicant what they had to say to this, and we had a chance to ask some questions. And I think I'd like us just to debate this as a group. Just again, I'm trying to be a little bit.
Councillor Thiessen into the queue before I had a chance to ask the delegation my question.
I think I also really clearly said that this is your chance to ask questions, and I'm not going to ask this after. And then all right, my apologies, Councillor Clayton. I looked around the room and I thought, and you had said once that you weren't going to ask a question. So, my apologies then if I mess up getting the queue, then I'll let you ask this question. So is the delegation still on the phone? Ms. Aitken, are you still there? All right, so Councillor Clayton, you had a question for the delegation.
Yes, Ms. Aitken, I'm curious in regards to the consideration of opportunities for landscaping. Right now, the 25% reduction is something that I'm not that comfortable with, and I wondered if there's any other possibility for improving this landscaping barrier that with the setback is being reduced.
As I explained, we can't reduce the building further just due to the constraints of the lot and the size of the parking and the fact that the suites are already compact, but we're happy to provide additional upgraded landscaping in the form of more trees and shrubs than are currently listed. We're at, right now, the required is 8 trees and 16 shrubs. We're at 12 trees and 24 shrubs. So if that was of interest, we're certainly happy to look at doing that.
Yeah, thank you. You know, so to the chair, my comfort level is much higher with this increase. So however you want to, if you'd like the motion amended, or if you want to carry on and look for a new motion, let me know.
Well, I believe, Mr. Tobin, correct me if I'm wrong, but for this increase, is that already in the development permit that's presented to us? So we don't need to make any motion to have those put in. Is that my understanding?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. Yes, I put that. In short, I put that under landscaping. I added the extra trees and shrubs in the landscaping area, and if not, I will make sure that they are in there. I'm pretty confident that I did. And as the lady, Ms. Aitken, explained, there's a certain amount of parking required for this development, and of course, we want hard surface paving. So the reduction is in the landscaped area, not in the actual landscape in itself. In the landscaping, it's the landscaped area, which also includes, well, including trees and shrubs. So what they're proposing is to increase the trees and shrubs to make up, and I think a perfect place to put those trees and shrubs would either be between Park Road and or the applicant to the northeast, the duplex to the northeast. But yes, they're included in the development.
I see that in point 6, so thank you.
Great. Are there any other questions that anybody has? Great. So last chance to ask questions. Great. Thank you everybody for bearing with us. It's our second time in this chamber setup, so thank you for everybody as we figure out how this all works. And I learned how to look around a way wider room than I usually have to look around. So we do have a motion on the table. Is there any debate on the motion that we've got on the table? Mayor Given.
Thanks, Chair Bressi. So I support the motion. One of the reasons, and I don't know that we necessarily need to record it in the motion, but I think it is very consistent with adjacent land uses, and this medium density provides an appropriate sort of transition up to the land to the northwest, which is zoned high density. One of the few lots in Grande Prairie that's actually zoned for high density development, and so this is an appropriate transition and really consistent with that transition from lower density up to higher density. So that's one of the reasons that I support it.
Great. I know one other thing I'll add in, that one of the concerns raised in the letter was that that the residents of this building will ask for that road to be paved. And I'll point out that this summer, Council approved funding to pave that road. So that was before we even knew that these variance requests were coming in. We already had plans to pave that road. So that's a concern that's already been addressed, fortunately, just by the timing of how everything happened and with the city's normal capital program. So any other conversation or debate? In that case, we've got a motion on the floor. Does anybody need the motion read? All right, so I'll call it to question. All in favor? And that motion carries unanimously. Great. Well, thank you very much. And then thank you for everybody that called in. Sorry that it was a bit of a delay. We appreciate all your patience. And we will move on to item 2.3, which is Smith Subdivision Project in Alberta Infrastructure and Land Exchange. And that's Ms. Coulter.
Good morning, councillors. Everyone can hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you and see you. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So this is more or less a two-part report where we're addressing two separate issues that are somewhat linked. The first portion of this report, it deals with the Alberta Land Exchange that occurred the Alberta Infrastructure Land Exchange that occurred when we were looking at getting the composite high school built. So administration's first recommendation is that council rescind the motion that was made September 14th, 2017, that was council designate up to 2.15 acres of Plan 1621196, Block 15, Lot 20 MR as markable and exchange for Plan 1421696, Block 6, Lot 21. The municipal reserve lot is the land that is adjacent to the Roy Bickle School in Royal Oaks. Administration is recommending that council instead designate 0.78 hectares of Plan 985219, Lot 1 as marketable and exchange for Plan 1421696, Block 620, Lot 21. This would allow Alberta Infrastructure to take a parcel of land in the Smith development, which they are aware and agreeable to as it is appropriately zoned and will be suitable for their uses. So we have been in communication with them surrounding that exchange. That is the first part of this. The second piece of this report is regarding the actual Smith subdivision concept. I will share my screen. I don't know how to share my screen. There it is. Share my screen. You just let me know if that shows up.
Sorry, we can see your screen now.
Perfect. Okay, so the city put an RFP out for the Smith subdivision development as well as the Park Road upgrades this summer. Helix was the successful proponent on this project and are well underway on this work. They have provided us with the shown concept, which we have determined to be the most cost-effective concept that will meet all the needs of the city for the Smith development area. There are shown as 4 lots. There's a lot for Alberta Infrastructure in that land exchange, as well as a 2.03 hectare lot to the north, which will be for the Grand Spirit Foundation, which was previously endorsed by council. There is an existing water main that was installed as part of the Juno development. So this was chosen for our road alignment so we can reduce the amount of rework that would come with realigning the road in a different location while keeping the land still serviceable. We are anticipating a January tender for this work with construction occurring next summer, so summer 2021. This work will be done simultaneously with the upgrades along Park Road. So we'll try and minimize the amount of disruption that is occurring in that area all at once. I think that's everything. So if anyone has any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Thank you. I see Mayor Given, before I get to him, just to ask a nuts and bolts to make sure I understand what's being suggested. So the really layman terms without all the numbers is there's land on this map you're showing us right now that was declared in 2017 as marketable. So we'd be saying, hey, that land's no more on the market, and we'd be giving some land on this map to Alberta Infrastructure. And then we'd be taking land near Roy Bickle School and declaring that as marketable. Am I understanding that right?
Not quite. So when we did the land exchange between Alberta Infrastructure and the city, they needed a portion of land to construct the composite high school. At the time, it was determined that we would give them a piece of that municipal reserve. Over time,
the municipal reserve by Roy Bickle.
Correct.
Okay.
So right now, the current motion says that they can have that piece of land for development.
Gotcha. So
Sorry.
we own the land by Roy Bickle. it would be saying we're retaining ownership of the Roy Bickle land, and instead we're giving them some land in Smith.
Correct.
Great. Thank you. You're just having to catch up a counselor who wasn't on council when all this went down, so I'm learning some history here. And I see Mayor Given with a question.
Thanks very much, Chair Bressie. Yeah, so yeah, that's exactly right by my memory. My question was to ask, so there's, in terms of the lot or the area that Alberta Infrastructure is going to get in this swap, is it actually lot 2? Like, I guess so can you specify, is there a specific parcel of land? That's the question. Is there a specific parcel of land that you could sort of reference on the concept plan that the province is going to be getting in this swap?
Through the chair. So we've actually have 2 lots that would be suitable for Alberta Infrastructure. They provided a couple different concepts on land they would be agreeable to. So Helix has provided options that aligned with them. So we would work with Alberta Infrastructure, and they could more or less choose the lot that worked best for their purposes.
Okay, thank you.
Great. And sorry, just a little bit more history. Their purposes are the potential Grand Spirit build. Am I understanding that correct, or?
Through the chair again. So Alberta Infrastructure, I believe, is looking at constructing senior housing. The Grand Spirit Foundation will take the larger Lot 1 to the north, which will be their multifamily housing.
Gotcha. So we're talking about there's potentially 2 developments in play that come on this. This is a completely separate than the Grand Spirit one. Gotcha. Thank you. Councillor Palat.
Thanks, Chair Bressie. Just a question. Can you, I guess, familiarize me what's going to happen? What's the intent with the Roy Bickle land if we're going to get that back as a city and we're doing a land swap here? What's the intent with that land?
Through the chair again. The original intent through all their planning documents says that was actually a dual school site. So at this time, I'm not aware of a school being allocated. But if we took that land back, we would have that opportunity.
Okay. And so can you walk me through, if it's not a school site, if the city chose to retain that lot, how hard would it be for us to put multifamily there later? If we're kind of swapping land to go multi to multi, how easy it would be for us as a municipality to turn what was supposed to be a school site into multifamily land?
Through the chair again. So right now that land is designated as municipal reserve. That does not allow for multifamily to be constructed. Like it's not a developable lot. It has very specific uses through the MGA. So what would need to happen is the city would have to dispose of that MR through land titles. And then we would have to complete ASP amendments, outline plan amendments, as well as looking at how the servicing in that area would occur, because it was originally serviced to be a public service zoning and a school site, not a multifamily. So there would be a substantial amount of work to do that to determine if it was possible.
Okay, so I'm just a little confused. It seems like the city would be getting a piece of, we already have an agreement, if I'm understanding this right, that the school has a piece of land. They want a different piece of land, but the piece of land that we'd get back in exchange sounds like it's going to be pretty challenging to make it used for something else. I'm just trying to understand why we'd want to make this exchange. I'm kind of confused with that.
Through the chair again, that land, as far as our planning documents, the ASP and the outline plan go, that land was never intended to be multifamily. There's other multifamily sites in that outline plan, so that area would retain its municipal reserve and public school zoning or public service zoning, so we could utilize it as a dual school site in that area. So there is other multifamily sites in that area that aren't currently developed.
Okay, and just one more question, if I can, Chair Bressie. Just curious if there's been any talk with the Soccer Association about this proposed concept. As we can all kind of see, there's a little bit of a ring road that kind of goes through there, and it's quite commonly full with cars when soccer is being used. I'm just wondering if this were to happen, how does administration anticipate parking happening for soccer in this area?
Through the chair again. So the city actually has an agreement with the Soccer Association there that permits them to use the soccer fields. And you can see on the map, there's actually a parking lot to the north, that triangular piece of land. from my understanding, it seems that land isn't being utilized in their soccer games. So essentially their parking operations would have to shift back up to the designated parking lot opposed to on the private city property right there.
Okay. And I guess for me, just speaking with this, I'm not really a fan of this at all. I think it's nice that we want to trade land, but I don't see how this actually benefits the city. And I'm still not, I guess for me, I'm not sold putting a whole bunch more multifamily in this area with no amenities around it is really a smart thing long term for our community. There's better use for this land personally. So although I'm not a voting member on this committee, I wouldn't be in support of this. I think that there's better uses for this land. There's multifamily owned, the city gets closer to amenities. If we're looking at seniors and putting more multi here, there's no schools nearby, there's nothing nearby this. So I'm not sure why we want to cram more multifamily by train traffic in this area of town. I think there's much better uses of land, and I'm not sure why we want to do a land swap to get back a piece of, when we've already got an agreement with the school board on a piece of land that we really don't have another use for other than the school. So I'm not in support of this one, I guess.
I see Mayor Given and Councillor Thiessen. Before that, Director Lavin, are you hoping to provide some information?
Yeah, just perhaps, I'm not sure if it's clear to all concerned here, but just to reiterate the history of the swap is that in Avondale, where the currently under construction, the high school's under construction, the lot furthest to the west was in the possession of the government for a future Alberta Seniors and Housing project. The school board needed that lot in order to get the high school to be built. They approached the city for a swap. We looked around the city as far as what would work for seniors and housing. At that time, the Smith subdivision was not one that came up on their radar. We found the site in Royal Oaks as one that would be suitable just because we were able to carve it out in such a way that it met their concept. That was not our first choice for a swap, as it does eliminate a school site. And we have also had inquiries over the years for a second Francophone school. The site in Royal Oaks is a suitable site for that, should we allocate one to them at some point in the future. And by shifting that site in Royal Oaks to the Smith subdivision, frees that up for a school site. So right now we own both lots, but we do owe Alberta the Alberta government one, as of right now, as per our land swap with them. I hope that clarifies fact.
Great. Mayor Given, then Councillor Thiessen.
Yeah, so for administration, I don't know so to what extent do we have the ability to, at this stage, define which piece of land is the subject of the swap? I guess I'm not comfortable, I'm generally supportive. I'm not sure if I'm comfortable just saying it's 0.78 hectares somewhere in here. Can we define that using the concept plan that's available? It sounded like the province could work with either of those two 0.78 hectare spaces. I'm starting to lean towards saying that lot 4 might make the most sense. And so do we have the ability, if we wanted to at this stage, to define which area of land we're actually swapping with the province?
Yeah, Director Glavin.
Thank you, Chair Bressie. So we have had a little bit of discussion about which lot would be most appropriate to swap. Now, they've given us the consideration for how much land they need. We've designed 2 options. We did have some discussion around whether lot 2 made the most sense, as there could be like uses, and given the province's intimations about public-private partnerships, whether or not there might be some synergy in having those 2 potential facilities, being the Grand Spirit and Seniors and Housing, having lots adjacent to each other in case there were some synergies to be developed there between the 2 projects. But long story short, the core criteria is 0.78 hectares, so I think they'd be happy with either one.
Great. Councillor Thiessen, then Councillor Clayton. Ms. Coulter, yeah, please, if you've got something to add to that.
Yes, through the chair. The other thing with Lot 3 and Lot 4 is we don't necessarily have to subdivide those into 2 lots. That if Alberta Infrastructure took Lot 2, Lot 3 and 4 could remain one large parcel of land as well. So there are options.
Great. Councillor Thiessen, then Councillor Clayton.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair Bressie. I'm just going to push back on Councillor Palat a bit as far as the amenities. Recently, I think I read a news article that stated that Save on Food / Sobeys was coming in to make a grocery store in the Cobblestone area with estimated development around 2022. Director Glavin, is that true? Like, I'm looking online. I can't find it right now, but I know I read the article, so.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Bressie. Yes, we've been working with the Sobeys Group for a number of years, and they are in the process of building a grocery store in that area. We don't have confirmed timelines yet, and that'll be made firmer as we get them through the development process.
Okay, thanks for that answer, Director Glavin. So I actually think that this is really appropriate use. It is as planned for a long time, and of course we can steer a direction into another direction if we want. But on the basis of amenities, there are convenience stores probably halfway going to the east and going to the west of this, and within the same distance is a Shoppers Drug Mart, as well as that big strip mall thing. And with the prospective build of a new grocery store in the Cobblestone area, which is going to serve the people on the east side of town alongside the co-op, I think it will have more than enough capacity to take care, I believe.
Great. Councillor Clayton, then I've got a question, then Councillor Palat.
Thanks, Chair Bressie. I echo the mayor's concerns. I would like to be prescriptive in regards to the lot. And if Alberta Infrastructure doesn't have necessary, specific needs, then let's be specific. Let's, take this opportunity to be specific in what we see with the rest of the land. I guess I had a question for Councillor Palat. You referenced multi-family, but I thought I heard administration reference that Alberta Infrastructure were using it for seniors housing. So you're calling seniors housing multifamily? Okay.
And so just for those on the call, Councillor Palat was nodded his head there.
Yeah. And so to clarify again through administration, Lot 1 is the Grand Spirit potential project. Whatever lot we choose will be an Alberta Infrastructure identified space for seniors housing, which remains which, as the drawing is provided by Helix, gives us 2 other areas for other opportunities. So generally, I'm in support of this. I do think there are other opportunities. And I don't know, does administration know, is there a timeline with Alberta Infrastructure? I mean, I think they just want the trade done. Do we know if there's a timeline for a seniors complex supported from Alberta Infrastructure?
Through the chair, no, they have not given us a timeline for a project, and I'm not aware of one that's in the budget at this time.
Yeah, so given that, I mean, this could change again, in my opinion. But yeah, so I'm generally in support of this project. Thanks, Chair Bressie.
Great. So I've got 2 more questions. I've got 2 more actual questions, not debate. And then maybe before other people chime in with their opinions, maybe I'll ask committee to get a motion on the floor first. So I'll go to Mayor Given with a motion after, if that's okay with you, Councillor Palat, unless you got questions. Okay. So just 2 other questions I've got is, one is there any possibility, or have we had the conversation of, can we just give Alberta Infrastructure a cash buyout and make it easier? Is that something that might be an option that they'd be open to?
Thanks, Chair Bressie. That subject has not been broached recently. When we initially did the swap, they wanted land. That is something we could discuss with them, but we have not engaged on that in this iteration of the discussion.
And have you engaged with it since our current government came to power?
No.
Okay. And then one other question, where I know that we've had Councillor O'Toole raise the thought of a potential low-cost recreation center here. I know we're also going to hear a different committee later this afternoon is going to hear we're going to hear from somebody asking for a soccer center here. Has there been any thought into if we go ahead with this, is there space to fit recreational needs on this land if council wants to?
Through the chair, we haven't done any significant work on that, but as Ms. Coulter did point out, that if Lot 2 were allocated to the government of Alberta, that would give us a lot of flexibility with Lots 3 and 4 and whether we subdivide or not in order to do something on there. It would also be important to note that if we did want to do any sort of intensive recreation, that we would need that decision relatively soon in order to proceed with design for this, to ensure that we have the appropriate servicing in place for it.
Great. Thank you. So I think Mayor Given's willing to make a motion, so I'll hand it to him, and then Councillor Palacios, I kind of jumped over you. I'll give you a first stab at it if you want it.
Yeah. So I will, well, I think, so there's sort of two main motions here. They're different things. And I'm kind of wondering if we can do both at the same time, but I'm willing to move the motions contained in the report. I just have a feeling that, yeah, they're a bit chicken and egg. So I'll move the two motions contained in the report. One, that council rescind the motion made. Committee recommend council rescind the motion made September 14, 2017, the special council meeting, which was that council designate up to 2.15 acres of Plan 162-1196 Block 15 Lot 20 MR as marketable and exchange for Plan 142-1696 Block 6 Lot 21. And I'd further move that committee recommend council designate 0.7 hectares of Plan 982-5219 Lot 1 as marketable in exchange for Plan 142-1696 Block 6 Lot 21. In speaking to the motion, it is a mouthful because there's so many lots and plans and everything. But in essence, this motion is a recommendation that council rescind the designation of a former school site as marketable land, basically returning it to a school site up in the Roy Bickle area, and that this committee recommends that council now swap land that the new composite high school is being built on, that was formerly city land, to the province for a 0.78 hectares in the Smith area. So maybe that's still complicated, but that sort of boils it down as best as possible. I'll just speak to the fact that I didn't specify which conceptual lot. I was convinced by administration's advice that there are benefits to actually keeping the ability to consolidate a larger lot into the two conceptual lots on the south into one larger lot. So I actually, in this situation, I think it's best if we defer to the people that are designing the projects and the buildings rather than as council trying to prejudge which parcel makes the most sense. I think administration has heard that council wants to retain some flexibility in this area, but at the same time, the biggest thing that I think Grande Prairie, our community, gets out of swapping land with the province is the fact that we're getting a high school. The prerequisite to getting that high school was having some land available for it to go on. And so we wouldn't have been getting it today and the stage that it's at if we hadn't traded land in the past. And finding land for the province that is suitable allows us to advance another priority, which is additional seniors housing. And so for both of those reasons, we're meeting a past commitment that allowed us to get a high school, and finding a way to meet that commitment will further our ability to get a new seniors project. So for both those reasons, I would encourage committee to support the motion.
Great. And Councillor Plata, I promise you first stab.
Thanks, Councillor Bresley and Chair Bresley. Just a question back to administration. I just want clarification. Councillor Clayton made a comment about, is there a trigger date that this transfer needs to happen? I'm just wondering if we need to move this forward today. I do feel like we have a delegation that's coming today with another request in this land. My fear is that we go and make this motion, make that happen, and this delegation comes forward and go, hey, that might be a great use for this land. And now we're back to where we're sending motions and making motions. So I'm just wondering if this doesn't get decided today, are we at risk with the province in any way?
Director Glavin.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Bressie. No, ultimately, we have allocated land as per the motions that were made back in 2017. We do need to transfer title to them before they complete the high school project. So, you know, theoretically, we've got about we'll call it a year to make this motion. Yeah, ultimately, we would like to see some finality to this as with the province. So does it need to happen today? No. Does it need to happen soon? Yes.
So I'm going to urge, again, I'm not a voting member on this. I'm going to urge you guys to just not support this today. There's no rush to do this. I think there's a lot of conversation that I would love to see happen. I'd like to know if Grande Prairie really wants this location. There's no supporting letter in here. Also want to remind us, we have a lot of other vacant land in the city that we can market. And as much as this, maybe there's going to be a new Sobeys within seven blocks, so probably about a 15-minute walk for a senior. That's going to be the closest amenity by. And I want you to be really honest about where you would like to see your seniors in your community. This is by a train track, by almost no amenities other than a soccer field that barely gets used other than evenings and weekends. A long walk away for people. There's a lot better locations in our city for a seniors complex, in my opinion. I also would like to make sure that if we're going to do this, again, I hope you don't support this motion because I think we should be having a conversation about this land and planning in general. But I also want to make sure we designate this specific piece of land. I don't like making a motion that we're saying we're going to give land to them because it could, to my interpretation, that could be anywhere within the site plan, and that could really change how we want to lay it out. Lot 2 specifically would be the absolute last lot I'd want to see us allocate for this because it pretty much makes us where we're saying soccer's done in this area. There's no way to keep building it out south. There's nowhere to really keep going for soccer if we designate lot 2. So I really hope you guys, if you want to support the motion, allocate lot 4 to it so we can try to still use this land. Otherwise, we're basically stagnating this piece of land for a project that may or may not happen in a location that, argue me all you want, if you ask seniors where they'd want to be and you picked about 10 locations, I would be very confident this would be well down on where a senior would actually want to live. So we can allocate land wherever we want. It's one of my pet peeves with government because we have land, we should build stuff on it. I'm sure we would take back some locations of where some things are built now if we just chose to feel, well, we had land there. It's okay to buy land when it's the highest and best use, which we hear through planning all the time. Highest and best use for land. This is not the highest and best use for a piece of seniors land, in my opinion. It kind of makes me sad that we'd even consider putting seniors in this location with as much vacant land as we have in the city.
I see Councillor Clayton.
Thanks, Chair Bressie. Although I agree with some of the comments Councillor Plott made, I do feel the location itself isn't a concern of mine. I think, granted, the train tracks are not ideal, but there's many situations that the train tracks are not ideal in our community. It's something we have to accept that we will never be able to move. Not in my lifetime, not in my kids' lifetime, and who knows, maybe they'll not be used in my kids' lifetime, but this isn't this is a reality of our community, that train tracks go in both directions through the middle of our community. I do think that the co-op and potentially with the new Sobeys store, that amenities are close for seniors. And I would argue that they're probably closer than even some of the other seniors complex on the west side. So that's not a concern for me. But the biggest concern for me is sterilizing other land. So I'll try an amendment. If I don't get support here, then there's some other options. So I would like to amend that council designate 0.78 hectares of plan 982519. Am I in the right spot? Sorry, give me 1 second. And identified as lot 4. So I think Ms. Van Bleek, that is just truly identifying that motion to amend that we identify that lot for the swap as lot 4. Thanks. And speaking to that, just quickly, as Councillor Plott mentioned, there are other opportunities in this. I think that we have an opportunity to be very prescriptive with this. Lot 4 may never come to fruition as a seniors complex. We don't know exactly what's going to happen with Lot 1 with Grand Spirit, but we have another motion that's coming forward, or that has already been passed, to look at low-cost recreation facilities. And although we haven't identified exactly where, this is a prime location for low-cost, multi-use recreation facilities in a neighborhood where families can walk to the recreation facility, and not just for soccer, for other opportunities. So I don't want to sterilize what could be potentially a huge amenity for this area, and to chunk off a piece of land, I'm okay with that, but let's be prescriptive and take our opportunity to tell the province, you know, yeah, you can have this land, but this is the piece that we're offering, since they haven't really been very directive in what their needs are specifically. So thanks.
Great. Before I move on with the conversation, just Ms. Van Beekveld, do you have what you need to record that motion to amend?
Thanks, Chair. I was just going to ask Councillor Clayton a question. You said designate 0.78 hectares of Plan 9825219, Lot 1, and identify the Lot 4, or are you switching Lot 4 for Lot 4?
I think if I'm understanding Councillor Clayton right, I think that it's whatever the specific wording, she probably is okay with whatever wording, but the intent is that council say in the map that we've got in front of us that Lot 4 is the specific piece of land that we're designating. And I see Councillor Clayton nodding with me. So that's the intent of her motion. Do you have what you need?
Yes, thank you.
Great. Is there anybody that would like to speak to this motion to amend? I'll speak to it. And for me, I'm against the motion itself. And I think this, if this amendment passes, makes it even more unpalatable to me. And for me, I think it's really what I really do agree with Councillor Plott in terms of I don't know if this is the right place for seniors housing. Even I remember when we designated a part of this to Grand Spirit, it was because they really needed designated land to move forward with grants. And they said, well, we could probably move that if you find more land for us in the future. And at the time I said, well, great, I'll put it here if it's the only way we could get seniors housing. But I'd sure love to find a way to move it out of this location if we can. So that resonates a little bit with me. But the biggest thing for me is just it's too early to be making this decision. I think that I think that we need to give soccer a fair listen, whether it's the soccer center, whether it's low-cost recreation. I really do want to get recreational amenities in this area. And I think that I want a decision made on that before we decide what we're going to be giving the province. And I think this motion makes it, I get the intent is to save the north portion of this area for that recreational center. And that makes sense looking at the map. But I don't understand what's going on with the pipes underground, and I don't understand what's going on with the infrastructure. So maybe that's actually not the best place to put that recreation center. And I think that if we make this more specific, it makes it even harder to get indoor recreation here. But so I can't support this amendment, and I can't support the main motion. I really think that we should be having this conversation in late November after we've gone through budget deliberations and decided we designated money towards some recreational area on this land first. So can't support the amendments or Councillor Clayton, and can't support the motion for now. It's too early for me to be talking about this. Any other conversation or debate? Okay, so then I'll call to question the amendment, which is to make the motion itself more specific in saying that this is only about Lot 4. So call to question Councillor Clayton's motion to make an amendment. All in favor? I see Councillor Clayton is in favor, and all opposed. And myself, Mayor Given, and Councillor Thiessen are opposed, so that amendment doesn't carry. And now we're back to the original motion, and I see Councillor Clayton again.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Bressie. I am comfortable that if this motion gets passes and the conversation gets to council, my intent then would be to table it for the very specific reasons that you have stated. I do think this is worthy of a full council conversation. So, you know, I'm happy to hear from my colleagues and what they think in regards to this. Chair Bressie's already indicated that to him it's waiting till after budget. I'd like to hear from other members of the committee sort of where they see, because if this motion passes today, my intent would be for when it gets to council to table the entire motion after a full council discussion. Thanks.
I guess where I'm coming from is that I don't think that this committee is sending to council, if this passes, I don't think we're sending this to council with the information council needs to make a good decision. And I think that because we don't know what's going on with the recreational space, so I don't think this is ready for a council conversation yet. Often at committee, I'll support pushing something to council, even if I don't support it myself, because I think that conversation should have at council. I just don't think that, I think we're kind of spinning our tires if this goes to council personally, because council doesn't have the information it needs yet to make that. So I respect that, but I respectfully disagree. I don't think we should be sending this to council yet, is my opinion. Any other debate? In that case, I'll call the question, or I'll call the question. So all in favor? I see Mayor Given and Councillor Thiessen are in favor, and all opposed, and myself and Councillor Clayton are opposed, and so that motion doesn't carry. And then I'm looking to administration. I'm assuming that we shouldn't just leave this dead. Would the recommendation be to leave this for now, and you'll bring it back when it needs to come back, or to make a motion to have this added to a future committee agenda, or with us not sending this to council right now, what would be administration's recommendation to make sure this doesn't get dropped? Director Glavin, are you there?
Yeah, thanks, Chair Bressie. So really, at the end of the day, what you guys are, as a committee, are looking for is more surety around what the low-cost recreation discussion, how that's going to play out, and what location might ultimately be chosen. One of the things that administration is looking for here is certainty, at least on the configuration of the area regarding the roadway, so that we can firm up design for this area and get it tendered. We're looking at 2 months or so for design to be done. So if we're trying to hit a January window to get this tendered for work as part of the overall Park Road project, pushing this into budget will, start to get us outside of the window that we were hoping to be in for tendering the project. So it would be useful for administration to know if the general configuration is acceptable. And I suppose the missing piece here that we're going to have is the ultimate land use in it, in that the intensity will dictate the level of servicing that we put into this subdivision. So with saying all that, I suppose that we're kind of just in a holding pattern until there's an ultimate discussion and decision made on this piece of land after budget. So sorry, Chair Bressie, I'm not sure if you were trying to jump in there.
Yeah, just Mayor Givens getting in. He might have a suggestion for how to move forward.
Well, no, not necessarily a suggestion, but it wasn't clear to me in this report. The recommendations didn't give us a recommendation that council or committee adopt or endorse the proposed development concept for the lands. I appreciate that there is the May 2014 motion where committee was saying, well, tell us what it's going to look like, or where council made that motion to say, tell us what it's going to look like. I appreciate that we now see a map of that. I guess if I had a recommendation, maybe Director Glavin, it would be that the development concept for the Smith subdivision come back in a report on its own. I think that there are some site constraints by memory. I think there's some site constraints that were sort of briefly referenced that will ultimately show that this is the best configuration, but maybe what administration needs to do is just give us a report that focuses solely on that development concept, that highlights the development context of those lands and the potential site constraints, all in one report so council can see that. I have a feeling that that will probably clarify about how we can lay out these lands. And so that would allow us to at least move forward on a configuration of the land and allow administration to move forward with that. So, that would be my advice, is let's detach the issue of the development concept, because here it was clouded with this swap and everything else. Administration, I think, could bring forward to a future committee meeting before budget some information about the development concept and how and seek council or committee endorsement of that development concept.
I'd also note that on our outstanding items list, we've got a motion to report back with current plans for Smith subdivision prior to commencing construction work on this. And that's what you were referencing. So yeah, so that's a report that's already on the docket for coming, was my point. So yeah, I think that it's, I think that we've probably got the report coming back that we need to advance this conversation is my understanding. Director Glavin, do you feel that you need more direction coming out of this committee meeting for this?
Thank you, Chair Bressie. This is the report that we were bringing back for the pertaining to the motion that was made May 14th, 2020. So we weren't anticipating bringing another report back, but we can do further work to bring back a report with additional information.
Well, and maybe this will take care of itself with the Community Services Committee today as a potential as well. But yeah, Mayor Gibbon.
Yeah. So Director Glavin, I think the suggestion that you could bring this back as an independent report would be really helpful. This report was focused on the land exchange, and that was the primary focus, I think, of the discussion. Council may wish to have more information about the services that are in that lot today, about the cost of moving those services to accommodate any other. Like I know that there's a whole bunch of other context. That's probably what we need is a report that is specific to that issue and shows all of those issues that impact why this is the recommended layout. Yeah, I think that's the right approach, and I know a lot of that information exists, and so if administration could put that together, that'd probably allow council to move forward on the issue.
Well, I think for me, really bluntly, and we'll see how community services goes, I want to know if we do build indoor recreation on the site, how does administration recommend that look? That's bluntly what I want on this, is to figure out, is indoor recreation on the site actually feasible from a land and infrastructure perspective, is I think the real question that we're dancing around. Councillor Palat.
Thanks, Chair Bressie. I think for me, the other thing I'd like to know is, and I think it's prudent that we actually meet with Grand Spirit. I mean, it's nice to hear that they want to build a facility. I'm hearing different numbers of how big the facility is. But back to my original conversation, if this is because it's the only piece of land, then great. But I don't think this is the only piece of land that the city has at disposable for a seniors facility. So for me, I'd also like to have us have a meeting with Grand Spirit at some point so we understand their intentions about what this is before we potentially stagnate a piece of land for it. So I'm fine with this being at a budget conversation. I realize it doesn't line up with what Director Clavin's saying if we want to tender it. There's an awful lot of multifamily land in Grande Prairie, so whether this road gets built and these other 4 lots come available or not, I don't think changes the drastic outcome of the city. And I would much rather this be after a budget conversation when we decide what we're doing with this land. As mentioned by a couple people already, if this is going to be a potential recreation site, I'd rather not spend a bunch of money on planning and engineering and design. It's never going to come to fruition.
So right now we've got some ideas for administration. We're not actually giving them direction. Is anybody interested in making a motion, or are we leaving this for now, or Mayor Gibbon?
So Chair Bressie, as you identified, there is an outstanding item on the outstanding items list. If we chose not to delete that off the outstanding items list, then it would still be outstanding. Administration could satisfy the outstanding items list by bringing a report forward. I don't think we need to give them any direction. I think I think they've heard the conversation. There's already direction to bring back a report on that item, and if council doesn't accept this as that report, then they're going to have to deliver us another one.
Right. Okay. Yeah. That works for me. Does that work for you, Director Glavin?
Yeah, that's clear enough for us. We'll work on bringing another report that addresses some of the more specifics that we've discussed this morning.
Great. Councillor Clayton, does that work for everybody else? Great. I'm not seeing anything. So, Councillor Clayton, you said something else is related to this matter, or is it? Right. All right, Councillor Clayton.
So I'd move that the Infrastructure and Economic Development Committee accept this report for information.
I think I remember from the administrative report that administration is going to go out and actually do something if we receive this report as information. And I'm assuming that you wouldn't, based on this conversation, based on the other motions passing, if we receive this for information, that really is just receiving this for information, not triggering new work. Would that be a correct assumption, Director Glavin?
Thank you, Chair Bressie. Yes, it's clear that we need further direction on this before we advance the project. So we will not advance the project prior to bringing a report back to committee.
Great. I think it's still great to have that motion, though, and acknowledge we got this report. So any conversation or debate in receiving this for information? All in favor? And that motion passes unanimously. And does that wrap up this topic? Great. I'm not seeing anybody else want to chime in. So we've got other business city communication for new homeowners. And this is something that we said we want to have a conversation later. And just given how long this meeting's gone, would there be any objections for a committee if we ask administration to put this on a future agenda? I don't think there's any urgency here. So we won't talk about that today. And I think administration heard us that we still want to talk about that. So I don't think we need a motion. Just asking administration, please put this on our agenda when it makes sense in the future. And then with that, we'll move on to our outstanding items list.
Thank you, Chair Bressie. No change in the outstanding items list today, as we'll be bringing back a future report on the Smith subdivision. We are on track for the community mobility plan update for the next committee meeting. With business licensing, we have a motion to have it on the next committee meeting. Right now, we had, from our public consultation, there's a few concerns that we're still looking to work through. So we're still aiming to have it on the next committee meeting, but there's a chance this one might bleed into the first meeting of October before we're able to be comfortable with satisfying the concerns that we've heard to date. And that's all I have for an update.
Great. Is anybody willing to make a motion to receive this? I think I saw Councillor Thiessen making the motion to receive as amended.
You sure did, Chair Bressie. Thank you.
Awesome. Then look into committee and discussion or debate. Let's call the question. All in favor? And that carries unanimously. And I'll call this meeting adjourned. But looking to Councillor Palat, I think you're the next one, and we need to do. We need to move the Zoom computer around. So, are you wanting a break? 5-minute break. Cool. So everybody on the phone, Councillor Palat will be back with his committee in 5 minutes.
helps if I have the mic on, apparently. Sorry about that. So we're going to get going with our Protective and Social Services Committee agenda. On this committee is myself, Councillor Thiessen, Mayor Gibbon, and Councillor O'Toole. And so with that, we will start off with a director service update with Director Manuel.
Hey, good morning. We'll start with community social development. Community social development, they report that the Youth Advisory Council recruitment is expected to conclude at the end of September, and that community engagement sessions held regarding proposed rezoning of two supportive housing projects were held September 3rd and 4th, and had pretty robust participation. Some follow-up will be coming forward on those in subsequent meetings. Enforcement services, the RCMP and fire department are each going to provide a quarterly update today. So we will bypass the director update for them to provide a direct report to committee. And with GPREP, they report that they'll be going forward to the Regional Emergency Management Committee with looking for approval of their 2021 budget. And they met with their agency stakeholders this past week and have identified their priorities for 2021. So with that being said, like I said, we'll provide the quarterly updates here shortly later on in the agenda.
Thanks, Mr. Manuel. Any questions for Mr. Manuel for his report? Councillor Thiessen?
Thank you very much, Chair Palat. Director Manuel, just a question. Recently, there's been a bit of a social media frenzy over enforcement in crossing the tracks south of Revolution Place. Myself, personally, this is the 5th complaint I've received this term. I spoke with the individual who was posted on Facebook recently about that, and simply he said he was crossing, and it's the CN Rail guards. I guess my question for you is does the city contract with CN Rail to help with the enforcement of the train tracks? And yeah, I guess I'll leave with that.
No. So good question. So the enforcement that's being conducted is being conducted by the CN Police Service. They are a private police service employed and directed solely by the railway. So their railway being federally regulated, those officers get their authorities from the federal, the Railway Act. And frankly, although we maintain a bit of a relationship with one another, the city has zero influence over their enforcement activities. They are essentially just looking to protect their assets.
Okay, so now the reason why I ask this is because we've had a lot of discussion about train whistling in the area. Now, the area south of the tracks is a high traffic location where I'd say probably every member of the city of Grande Prairie at some point or another has crossed over from parking like in the south area for anything from a Remembrance Day ceremony to a storm game to a concert to a meeting that's potentially taking place there, a trade show. So what kind of recourse does the city of Grande Prairie have in regards to CN Rail if they do not want people crossing the tracks in that area about laying down fence themselves?
So it's my understanding that in years past that CN has been very intent on putting fencing across, particularly that area south of Revolution Place. And it's been the city that has been asking them kindly to prevent doing so, because we would essentially have to create a fairly costly pedestrian bridge, for lack of a better description, or encourage people to use the existing crossings at the street. So that being said, I know CN's primary concern isn't so much the pedestrian crossing right there, but more next to City Hall and the hospital site. They have greater concern there. Down in those parking lots south of Revolution Place, the primary concern has to do with the trespassing and drinking that occurs along the tracks there.
Mm-hmm. No, I understand that, but 3 of the 5 complaints that I've received were just simply from people who were crossing. Like the most recent one was a gentleman who posted on Facebook was just going from one place of work to another place of work, across the tracks, and got a $300 ticket. So now the city got a little bit of heat. I talked to him and I said, hey, you know what, we may contract every now and again to them, but I'm not 100% sure. I'll bring it up at committee. Yeah, I'm just wondering what our recourse is, because I know these discussions that we've had about anti-whistling in the city of Grande Prairie, and CN's response was we'd have to do a perimeter fence all the way around the entirety of the tracks. Could this be a way that we could encourage CN, if that's what they wish to do? They could do that, and then we could, you know, maybe entertain the idea of doing the rest of the perimeter of the tracks in the city.
So again, like I was saying, I believe that CN was actually inclined to put a fence across by Revolution Place. They're certainly not inclined to do it across the entire city. I think they have zero interest in taking that cost on. But I know for this particular corridor, that is something that they considered in the past. It does have some pretty significant implications on Revolution Place.
Okay. Well, anyways, I just want to bring it up. Thank you very much for that. I'll respond to the resident and I just encourage them to do what I already encouraged them to do. Thank you.
All right, thanks for that. Councillor Bressie had a question?
Yeah, I was actually just curious, since Councillor Thiessen brought this up, a question I had on this matter with CN is, Director Emanuel, do you know how the revenue split happens with that? Does CN actually get to keep the money it does from that, or does that all go to government coffers? Or I know how the revenue splits happens if we issue a ticket. I don't know what happens if CN issues a ticket.
The last I had checked, I believe that the fines that are generated return to the jurisdiction in which they're generated in. I believe that's one of the balances that they have around it being a private company. Is I don't think they want the revenues created by the private police force to return back to the corporation that's employing them. So I do believe, very similar to if an Alberta sheriff writes a ticket in the city of Grande Prairie, that those are cost coded back to the city of Grande Prairie.
Thank you.
Okay. No other questions for Director Manuel, so thank you for your update, Director Manuel. We'll move on to item 1.2, diversity and inclusion update, and we'll look for Ms. Angela Sutherland, please.
Hi there, good afternoon. I'd like to present a little update for committee on some diversity and inclusion initiatives that are happening. So I'll just dive into the report. As you know, the city of Grande Prairie has had a long history of public commitment to addressing discrimination and celebrating diversity and inclusion. For those of you that don't know, in 2006, the city actually became a signatory to the coalition, Canadian Coalition of Municipalities Against Racism and Discrimination, which was coined CMAR. In 2019, it was rebranded as a Coalition of Inclusive Municipalities, and now it represents a network of over 80 municipalities from across Canada. The signatory municipalities rely on 10 common commitments, which I had attached in the report. And just generally, the 3 common commitments relate to 3 primary areas. One, the municipality is a guardian of public interest, the municipality is an organization in the fulfillment of human rights, and the municipality is community sharing responsibilities for respecting and promoting human rights and diversity. So over the years, the city has done a lot of great work around supporting inclusion and diversity within the community and within the organization. And as a part of that commitment, I'd like to highlight a couple of things that are happening. One of them being in 2015, the city became the backbone organization for the Grande Prairie Local Immigration Partnership, which is federally funded. And this program is made up of 2 working groups. One is the council, which leads to development and oversees local settlement strategies and action plans, and the Immigrant Advisory Table, which includes immigrants and newcomers that are representative of our community with lived experience to provide input on immigrant issues. Administration felt that with the current state of ongoing anti-racism movements, both globally and locally, that there is an opportunity for the city to continue to be a leader in the region by continuing to build on inclusion internally and externally with our stakeholders. So one of the things that I'd like to highlight around the GP Lift is just to give you an update on what's happening. So this initiative really demonstrates the importance of working with local stakeholders and people with lived experience to address and eliminate racism and discrimination. So some of the priorities they have set out for 2020 and 2021 are, and I've listed them in the report, so I won't go through each of them, but really overarching, it's housing, education, and language, health and wellness, employment, government services, and education and awareness around inclusion and discrimination. CSD continues to work with GPLIC to promote the shared awareness and common goals, and I think it's a very timely matter in terms of what is happening to continue to mobilize and work with them on advancing education around anti-discrimination and racism in our community. One of the other things I'd like to highlight that's happening internally is the Municipal Inclusion Initiative. So this derives out of a grant that we had received as a municipality through AUMA. And in 2019, we were awarded this grant that helps municipalities strengthen our inclusivity as an organization. So really this grant helps support strategies and action plans based on an evaluation that we conduct internally. And as a result of that evaluation, we have come up with some goals in an action plan. So they include some of the key following actions, and administration believes that these are things that are tangible and measurable that the municipality can achieve in being a leader on and being an inclusive organization. So a few of them include reaffirming our commitment to CIM. I know that back in 2006 we signed on, and I think it's important to recognize as people in public service and in our organization and leadership that we do reaffirm our commitment to CIM. I also attach a letter of a call to action in the report from CIM on what municipalities can do. We've also worked on a creation of an internal diversity and inclusion team, which will be made up of interdepartmental partners within the organization that can evaluate our plan and ongoing initiatives that promote inclusion and equity. One of our recommendations is to create an annual diversity and inclusion report card that can be shared with council. So I think that as an organization, we're doing a lot of good work, and this kind of mechanism would help provide an update to senior leadership and council on things that are happening, things that we're doing well in an intentional manner, instead of some piecemealing or pockets of good work that people are doing. We collect it in a way that provides a story for ourselves and for the community. We'd like to include community stakeholders on that as well in terms of highlighting things that we are doing with the community. One of the other key things that administration would like to do is review municipal policies and practices through a diversity inclusive lens and collect demographic diversity data on employees and external communities to better inform our goals and initiatives. A few of the other goals and actions we've highlighted are to talk about training for council and staff to better understand our obligations through the equity, diversity, and inclusion lens, and to identify systemic barriers to accessing our programs and services. And of course, ultimately, is to continue to leverage our opportunities, working with community organizations on actions to address systemic racism and discrimination. I know I have put in the relationship to City Council's focus areas and strategic directions as one that delivers programs and services that meet the social needs. However, I think that if you look at our in Council's plan, it's really important to note that in the vision, we talk a lot about leveraging diversity, we talk about promoting inclusion and ensuring that the needs of our residents are met. So in actuality, this type of work is key in all aspects of our organization and in the plan. In terms of stakeholder engagement, as mentioned, internally there is an internal committee that we have struck to help drive this AUMA grant. But in the near future, working with senior management is forming a diverse group of individuals across the organization with lived experience to really help us provide that necessary input and evaluation on inclusion and diversity work within. And externally, administration will continue to work with GP LIP, our other community partners, and other stakeholders on actions and initiatives. So administration overall, we have access to up to $50,000 to help us implement this plan. And administration is very confident that we can, that these deliverables that we have outlined are achievable. So in summary, I mean, governments across the country have been promoting equity, diversity, inclusion, and many of these we call EDI requirements are common practice and strongly recommended. And I think that the City of Grande Prairie can continue to build and be a leader of change in this area and demonstrate its commitment to creating society where all of our residents feel included, have a sense of belonging, and really as an organization also to look at ourselves and how we reflect the community, how we serve the community, and ultimately how we can create and continue to build on our policies, practices, and engagement so we can continue to improve in this area. So that's my report in a nutshell. Open to any questions.
Thank you for your report, Ms. Sutherland. We'll just look around. Does anybody have any questions for Ms. Sutherland on their report? Councillor Bressie and then Mayor Given.
Great. Thank you for the update. I appreciate it. I'm just curious, the report focused a lot on anti-racism and people of different ethnicities and creeds and races, but where do our residents who have different physical, cognitive, sensory abilities fit into this? Are they captured in these inclusion policies and efforts, or is that a kind of a separate stream we've got when we're thinking as an organization?
Through the chair, that's a really good question, Councillor Bressie. No, I think in terms of what we're looking at ultimately is when we're talking about inclusion, we're talking about looking through the lens of different factors. So we did focus on this particular report around working with people of color, but ultimately, when we're talking about equity, diversity, inclusion, it is across the sectors or across the different factors such as gender, abilities, sexual orientation, religion, all of the factors that you mentioned will be included in the plan.
Mayor Given.
Thanks very much, Councillor Plott. Yeah, so I appreciate the report and the wide range of things that are there, but Angela, it's not quite clear to me if is there a specific request or action that that council needs to take? I see that the CMAR, the Coalition of Inclusive Municipalities, has some specific recommendations of things that municipalities could or should be doing, and some of them seem like stuff council would have to endorse or direct, and even the AUMA grant-funded plan has a bunch of specific action items, and I guess I'm curious if there's a question, like what support do you need for council to activate these things? Are they just happening, or is there a greater role for council to take in explicitly asking administration to do those things to demonstrate that it's a council-endorsed activity?
Thank you, Mayor, through the chair. I think that, the original intent was to provide some updates and information on this, but ultimately, when we're talking about creating an inclusive organization, it does require a commitment from all leaders, which include council. So when we're talking about reaffirming our commitment as a signatory, that would involve council. I would look further into what exactly is needed around what that firm commitment would mean in terms of, is it a letter, is it some sort of address? But also I think in terms of some of the action plans, we're talking about training, we're talking about orientation, we're talking about endorsing that, you know, these are the steps that we're taking as an organization to really look at ourselves on how we can address and become better as people that are committed to working through the equity, diversity, and inclusion lens. So yes, I do think there's a role for council to play in this because it will include the participation and endorsement from council members to want to stand behind training, to want to participate. And I think there's many avenues here that that will come out of this. So I'm just going to speak right now around some of the opportunities, and we're looking at not only anti-racism work, we're talking about looking through a gender lens, and we're talking about our truth and reconciliation and how we as a municipality are meeting our commitments there. So I think there's a lot of avenues here that we will be engaging with council on, and I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think so, but so it really still seems, the recommendation in this report is to receive it for information, which, so I'm just sort of puzzling and thinking a little bit about what actual motion we might make today, other than just receiving for information. It's good to see some of the information here about things that are happening by other groups, but I'm trying to mull over my mind about what we could actually do to further this a little bit more so it actually has some endorsement by council. Thanks, and I'll think about that. Thanks.
Okay, thanks for that, Mayor Gibbon. Councillor O'Toole.
Hello. Thank you very much. Mayor Gibbon, your thoughts were exactly the same as mine when I read this report, that this seems pretty a good report, but to accept it for information was not what I expected. So I'm understanding that this was a report that you wanted to present to council today, and I'm sort of thinking ahead that you're going to come back with some requests in the near future on some proposals that you would like to see motions made for. Is that correct?
Through the chair, yes, Councillor O'Toole. I think that as we do move forward on some of this work, there will be some things coming forward for endorsement from council.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? If not, I guess I'd entertain a motion. Mayor Gibbon.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Platt. So I would move that committee receive the report for information and direct administration bring back recommendations on opportunities for the city of Grande Prairie to renew its commitment to inclusion and the elimination of racism, period. And so the intent of my motion is to ask administration to come. So this is a good overview of sort of what's currently out there, but it isn't actually asking council to endorse or approve or fund or direct. And I think that our community expects council to be fully engaged in these kind of issues. As Angela highlighted, the City of Grande Prairie has previously endorsed and joined the Canadian Coalition of Municipalities Against Racism and Discrimination. We haven't actually acted on that in quite a while, certainly not at the council level. And so the intent of my motion is to ask administration to collect some of these initiatives that are proposed and bring them forward so council can choose whether we wish to actually initiate them at the council level and endorse them. And if there are some staffing requirements or funding requirements, then we have an explicit action by council that says, yes, these are appropriate ways to dedicate the resources that are required. Yeah, and I just would feel, I think that that's the right step for us to take because this report does provide that overview. But again, at the council level, we haven't actually specifically asked administration to bring forward anything. And an example is that reaffirmation of commitment to the CMARD. That's a council motion to reaffirm that. The creation of a annual diversity and inclusion report card. I think council should talk about that if we want to direct administration to do that or not? And if we do, how much time and effort will that take? It sounds to me like that's something that it would be on top of the work administration's already doing, and we should have a discussion about whether the City of Grande Prairie wants to put resources into that. So I'm just asking for administration to provide a little bit more definition around some of these things, and put it in front of council in a way that is, council, here's what you can and could do, and here's what the cost of those things would be, you know, and then council discusses and debates. So that's the intent of my motion. Receive the report for information with thanks, and then direct administration come back with some more specific actions and recommendations to council.
Thank you for that motion, Mayor Given. I'm just going to ask if the recording secretary could read it back, and then we'll open it up for discussion and debate, please.
Thank you, Chair Block. I have committee received this report for information and direct administration to bring back recommendations on opportunities for the City of Grande Prairie to renew its commitment to inclusion and the elimination of racism.
Okay, thank you for that. So I think it's fairly clear. Any conversation or discussion on that? Councillor Bressie?
Thank you. I'm just kind of curious, at the end you've got, and the elimination of racism, is the intent of that to narrow the scope of this work, or is the intent of that to say make sure this is included? And just for me, it's, if we're going to talk inclusion, I really do support talking about the elimination of racism, but it really is important to talk about including all of our residents, including from different sexualities and genders, including people of various abilities.
Go ahead, Mayor Griffin.
Yeah, thanks for the question. No, my intention was to ensure that inclusion was the first part of the motion and broadly defined, but also recognizing and acknowledging that racism is a specific subset of inclusion that there is a lot of societal discussion about right now, and that certainly we haven't eliminated in Grande Prairie by any means. And so it is not meant to limit, but to ensure that that specific focus is addressed.
Councillor O'Toole.
Thank you very much, Councillor Palat. I thank you very much, Mayor Given, also for making that motion. I totally agree with it 100%, and I got your support.
Okay. With that, I don't see any other hands up in chambers or on Zoom here, so I will call the question. All those in favor? And so I will record for the recording secretary, myself, Mayor Given, and Councillor O'Toole. And opposed? Oh, sorry, I didn't see Councillor Thiessen. My bad. Councillor Thiessen was in favor as well. My bad, sorry. So that was unanimous. Okay, so thank you for that, Ms. Sutherland. I appreciate the report. And we'll move on to 1.3 banded pause agreements, and I'll look for Mr. Kelly Kokash, please.
Thank you very much, Chair Palat. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm here to give you a quick report on bandage pause. This stems from July 13th, 2020 council meeting where bandage pause attended looking for additional funding. So it came back to, wanted to come back to the appropriate standing committee to assess immediate and ongoing financial support and the viability of the city building a relationship, a better relationship with bandage pause. As per the report, the background over the years, we've had various business models with the city and county and external providers delivering this service of sheltering, care, and adoptions of animals. 2009 to the present day, it outlines that the GPSPCA was involved up until 2015, 2016. 2017, the SPCA closed, whereby at that time, the regional animal care facility was expanded to provide that service on a temporary basis until we could probably, hopefully, provide or locate another society to assist with that. In 2019, Bandage Paws came into the picture, providing animal care, shelters, fosters, adoptions, and our GP animal care facility still continues to operate to supplement that. So Bandage Paws was founded in 2012. They have 7 employees and have a strong volunteer base. They're financially supported by public donations and fundraising opportunities. Their annual deficit for 2019-2020 was reported to us as $80,000 $769. They have a total annual budget of $687,000, $84.19. They came to council to report their loss because of fundraising problems with COVID-19 and things they were encountering this year. However, since that point in time, they've actually declined that request, and they've been able to secure some funding to bridge them. In 2016, the regional animal pound expanded to the RACF because we had to provide temporary sheltering for animals and do the adoption process. Along with that, so Bandage Paws came into the picture. Now we pay them a fee in order to take dogs and take over animals that the care facility cannot take care of. The city and counties have a 60-40 split, respectively, based on the average intake ratio. The 2019 operating cost for the regional animal care facility was $362,494. The analysis in the proposed agreement, the city and county presently have a 60-40% split, respectively. And we're looking at collectively providing $100,000 a year to Bandage Paws on a quarterly basis, paid in a quarterly basis. That's based on so they would take all the animals from our care facility, up to 700 animals per year. If the animals exceed 700, the overage fee of $100 would apply. There is a suggestion of a new chart and new overages costs, but that can be considered here later on. The agreement that we're proposing would also specify that the Bandage Paws would have regular reporting of financials, the number of sheltered and fostered animals, length of time these animals are in their care. It's recommended that the agreement be for a 3-year term. And there's also the availability to utilize other agencies, such as Chaos and Petland, to offset excessive numbers of animals. So once this agreement would be in place, the regional animal care facility would no longer provide adoption services and would just revert back to their regional pound. Environmental impact, there would be no environmental impact. Economic impact would be that in the future we would leave the present staffing in the pound just to make sure that the Bandage Paws is able to handle the amount of animals and that they have a sustainable model. For risk, if the proposed agreement is not in place, there's a potential risk that the Bandage Paws would not be able to secure funding to sustain us and support a long-term operation. Alternatives, there are alternatives for our societies outside of Grande Prairie. We have utilized Chaos, or Companion Animal Outreach Society in Red Deer, at a cost of $100 an animal. They've been very good to work with, but they are, of course, out of not in Grande Prairie and not local. Stakeholder engagement. We've had lots of conversation. We have monthly conversation with the county, and we've had lots of conversations with Bandage Paws on how they're making out with their new facility, and also discussions pertaining to the proposed agreement, just to flesh out some things. The budget and financial implications, simply that the city's portion of the RACF operating budget for 2020 is $235,000. If approved, a further $45,000 annually will be needed to be allocated to support the agreement. This partnership that is proposed is not a departure from our previous models. As you can remember, we did have a very similar agreement with the Edmonton Humane Society, but that did not come to fruition. And it is hoped that Bandage Paws is able to fiscally manage their operations and within the established budget to provide a sustained animal care facility for the Grande Prairie region. Administration recommends entering into a tri-party agreement with the county and Grande Prairie and Bandage Paws to establish a sustainable model for animal care and adoptions. I would imagine there's going to be some questions. Myself and Director Chris Manuel will be open to any questions.
Thank you for that, Mr. Kokesh. I see Councillor Thiessen with a question.
Thank you very much, Chair Pilot. Thank you very much, Mr. Kokesh. Kelly, my question for you is in regards to this new contract on the fee for service, I guess, for the 100K. Is this above and beyond the fee for a typical animal transfer that we would provide Bandage Paws? Does this still include that?
It's inclusive of the transfer, so it would include up to 700 animals per year.
Okay, so just to be really clear, so we pay them fee for transfer to, you know, send out and adopt another animal when it gets beyond what we want. So I see on average over the last 3 years there was about 565, we could say. So this $100,000, that is also going. So that's $100,000 from the city and county plus the typical fee for animal transfer.
The $100,000 would cover up. I'm not sure if, through the chair, I'm not sure if I'm understanding your question, other than $100,000 covers up to 700 animals. Then beyond that, a transfer fee.
Okay. Now, in the past, we would give them a transfer fee, right?
Correct.
Okay. So would the $100,000? It's covering that, or it's $100,000 plus any animals transferred from the pound?
Let me just take a stab at it there, Councillor. So through the chair, I think we're close here. So what's going to happen is presently the Regional Animal Care Facility transfers their animals to a variety of organizations, and Bandage Paws is just one of those organizations. Mm-hmm. So today, the only financial arrangement that exists between the pound and Bandage Paws is when we do transfer an animal, we attach that per animal transfer fee. What's proposed here will see us have essentially a retainer where we pay on a quarterly basis, I believe it's proposed, up to the equivalent of 700 of those transfers front loaded. So there would be no additional fees for those first 700 transfers, and anything in excess of the 700, if we were to exceed that, would then be on a per animal basis. Does that make sense?
100%. Thank you very much. Let's go.
Thanks for that, Councillor Thiessen. Any other questions at all? I just have one question, I guess, if nobody has got their hand up. I'm a little bit curious if you can maybe explain to me. In the report, it says that our operating budget for this year, the city's portion, is $235,000, and then annually would be $45,000 after that. So is the $235,000 basically for recoup of just recapturing the money that we owed to this point? And then I'm also, I guess, two questions. I'm also a little confused when we're saying 60-40. Why are numbers 45,000 a year moving forward? I'm not sure if that's for Kelly or for Chris, but.
So Kelly, I can take a go at that. Sorry, Councillor, you kind of faded out at the end, but I believe I captured what you're looking for. So the way it works is the Regional Animal Care Facility today, which is also part of the pound, is a partnership between the city and the county of Grande Prairie. So the total cost of operating that facility are split 60-40, and the budget amount that you referred to as the $200,000 some odd thousand is the city's portion of that 60%. The additional $45,000 essentially will represent the additional cost of us no longer providing our own adoptions, but by transferring those animals to the Bandage Paws to be adopted. A couple of the reasons to do this are twofold. So one, the facility that we are operating the adoptions out of right now was never meant for that purpose. It was a Band-Aid solution we put together when the SPCA folded, and we needed to provide that service to the region. So we've been really operating it out of our existing pound space, and it certainly hasn't been desirable, but the county who manages the facility and operates it on a day-to-day basis has done a good job making it work. The other component is there's no doubt that part of this $45,000 additional dollars is really a financial subsidy to Bandage Paws to help them provide more stable revenues that they can rely on for their operations.
Thank you for that. Just Councillor Bressie and then Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you. I'm just curious, as we're looking at increased costs, has administration considered or thinking about considering recommending an increase to pet licensing fees to help offset the cost for this?
We could through the chair, we could certainly consider that. At the present time, we have not increased the amount of licensing. It is something we have talked about in the last month, though. Certainly something we can consider.
Councillor Bressie. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Chair Palat. Just a question in regards to the overall budget of the pound facilities here. If we're no longer doing adoptions through what the city and county collectively do at the regional animal care facility, do we require the same budget? Like, would that mean that, like, I would imagine adoption is a fairly intensive employment, I guess. Like, you're going to be busy, like taking care of the animals, feeding the animals. Obviously that goes in your day-to-day, but ensuring that they have their shots so that they're good to go for adoption. Has administration with the county looked into whether or not there can be budget reductions with the transfer of our responsibility in adoptions?
Through the chair, we have talked about the reductions in the budget regarding the pound. Fact of the matter is, though, it wouldn't really reduce the amount of animals that we intake at the pound. We still would have to have the 7-day holds and determine where they're from. Large portion of the animals we do take, we do return to the owners, or we still have to convert them into a viable animal that we can rehome. So then they're still transferred to the Bandage Paws or whatever society is there. The other thing to consider is that we still have a lot of unknowns this year about COVID-19 and also sustainability of the Bandage Paws. So we're a little hesitant to reduce the present staffing levels at the pound until we have a really stable model. What is there to consider?
Okay, thank you for that answer, Kelly. Appreciate it.
Okay. So seeing no further questions, I just ask if somebody was willing to entertain a motion on this one, or if there was any other thoughts. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Chair Palat. I would move that committee direct administration enter into an agreement with the County of Grande Prairie and Bandage Paws to establish a sustainable model for animal care and adoptions. Speaking to the motion, I guess I could. I want to thank administration for bringing this forward and being thoughtful and considerate of our four-legged citizens that may or may not have a home, and ensuring that a group such as Bandage Paws, who cares so very much for those four-legged furry critters, that they have a sustainable model, that they can continue to provide the services that they do, not just to the citizens of Grande Prairie, but to the broader region as well. So, for all those reasons, I want to thank administration for this and encourage them to still look at our own budgets when we get out of our own constraints here. But for right now, I think this is a good direction, and thank you for that. I hope you all support.
Okay, thanks for that, Councillor Thiessen. Any discussion or debate on it? Councillor O'Toole. You want to try a different mic, Councillor O'Toole, or just take a minute here? We're having some technical issues in chambers here.
Yes, thank you very much. I just didn't want Councillor Thiessen to forget about the snakes and the chickens. So we do look after those as well. Thank you.
All right, well, that's a nice add. Okay, so seeing no other conversation on this motion, I'll just ask all in favor? Okay, and that's carried unanimously. Thank you for that. So we'll move on to item 1.4, our quarterly reports. And actually, we'll start back with Kelly if he wanted to start the reports. We'll start with you in the queue first, please.
Thank you, Chair Palat. Report for Grande Prairie Enforcement Services. Very interesting quarter for sure. We had, beginning of this quarter, we implemented a full-time 4-member bicycle unit. We had a lot of great feedback regarding that. They were focused on downtown issues, street engaged people, the park corridors, South Bear Creek, and also made sure that they rode through all the neighborhoods in Grande Prairie. We had very good feedback on that and very successful. The officers that were involved in that were extremely delighted to be part of that unit. We're initiated commercial vehicle inspections, and we were on track. Should be everybody finished up by the end of Q4. Because of the circumstances we found ourselves in, provincial offenses and all offenses were really reduced drastically due to working conditions. We transitioned into regular operations here in August, and just getting back to regular work with some work guidelines as well for community and public engagement. Other than our numbers are really down, our dispatches and calls for service were still slightly higher than last year, and they continue to keep our officers in our office engaged and busy. That would be all I have for the quarterly report this time.
Okay, that's great. Thanks for that. Any questions? Okay. So thank you for that. Seeing none, I guess we'll move on to Mr. Curry with the RCMP for his report, please.
Hopefully everyone can hear me there. Technical whiz, I am not. Thank you, Chair, Mr. Mayor, Councilors, for having me. For the Q2 report, Director Emanuel should have provided some raw data, but a trend from January to June, which you can see here on your screen, is that our criminal code offenses are down by 10% as compared to 2019. In particular, if you look below in the property crimes, we're seeing large double-digit decreases. As Kelly had said, no doubt there were severe implications because of COVID for that time frame and people being home, and that certainly contributed to those numbers being down. Of note, though, for the Q2 stats, the detachment saw a 23% decrease in criminal code offenses in Q2. Some items of note for that time frame is we did have a homicide in that time frame in April. Persons crimes decreased by 14%, and property crime, when we compared it to Q2 of 2019, decreased by 23%. So that's kind of an update or a snapshot of the trends for the detachment. I would like to, though, raise 2 other items, if I may. The first is that we have had some graffiti in the city. Kelly and I are liaising on that, and I had a contact in another detachment in the country there who specializes in graffiti investigations. So I have an investigator assigned to that, and they're collaborating with our SME, hopefully to eliminate that problem. And the other item I would like to raise, it's not a Q2 issue per se, but for Staff Sergeant King and myself, we're here now a year, if you can believe it. We've been in position at the detachment for a year, so it was a challenging year, as you can imagine, as everybody lived through. Lots of great opportunities there, and I think we have a really good opportunity that we're starting next week. One of the issues that we had noted during our review of the detachment and some of the things that were occurring was that there was a 39% increase in spousal abuse files over the last couple of years. That, in conjunction with gaps that have been noted in sexual violence files, caused us some concern. So as of Monday, I am standing up a special investigative unit, and this unit will be comprised of 1 corporal and 5 constables. And the mandate of this unit will be to provide service to our most vulnerable victims of violence here in the Grande Prairie area. And they are going to focus on domestic violence calls and sexual violence calls. So we're quite enthusiastic for this unit. I believe it'll be a tremendous asset, investigative experience to be developed here for the community, and hopefully it'll have a very positive influence. That's all I have, Chair, Mayor, and Councillors.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Curry. Any questions from Council or Committee on that one? Mayor Gibbon?
Yeah. Sean, thanks very much for the report. Not a question, just thanks. I really appreciate you setting up that special unit. That's the kind of professional advice I think that we expect from our detachment commander about trends. I appreciate that that's a long-standing trend that you're addressing, and I really appreciate your leadership on doing that and bringing that forward. So thank you for that, and thank you for the update so that we know about it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, any other questions? Councillor Bressie.
Thank you. I'm just curious if there's any concerns we should be aware of in terms of time in courts. I don't really know where the courts are, but I've heard some concerns about backups with COVID-19 and catching up on cases. I know that officers spending significant time in testimony is an issue in terms of having people available in the community. When people transfer, if they have to come back to testify in court, just as we're thinking about provincial advocacy, as we're thinking about the impacts of provincial systems on our local policing, are there any concerns you have, or just is that something that you've thought through and that you anticipate any challenges that we should know about?
Well, since I've been here, I've had several meetings with Mr. Hinckley, the Chief Crown for the area. We've been trying to have a very collaborative relationship, and I think that we do. We consulted at the beginning of COVID and aligned our direction to our respective areas. As far as the courts go, more specific comments than that, I would suggest that perhaps Mr. Hinckley could make a presentation to council or that area. That's not my jurisdiction, if you will. That being said, I also believe that there is a considerable interest in increasing the use of CCTV for testimony. As we know, especially for us here in the detachment, we do get transferred around, and the costs can be steep at times because we're a national police force. But there is a much greater push at the moment to have CCTV used to reduce these costs, and the courts seem to be very open for my discussions with the Chief Crown for their use.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Mr. Curry. I just have, I guess, one question or comment. I hear quite often in the community that a lot of people aren't phoning the RCMP, which just is concerning me because they're just feeling that they're with small crimes that they're not being dealt with. Can you speak to that? And is there any truth to that? I guess I'm hearing it quite often in the community lately.
I don't have any data on that, so it's a little difficult for me to speak to it. Certainly the higher end crimes, we are getting those phone calls, and I would also remind council that we did begin online reporting. So if you do receive questions from constituents or maybe alternative methods of reporting what they would consider maybe more lower end crimes or thefts or that type of crime, there are other opportunities other than phoning the detachment. So we'll certainly take their call, we'll certainly take their complaint. But if they want to try an online version and that's more convenient for them to make the report and provide us with that information of where crimes are occurring, that is another opportunity for them.
Okay. Thanks for that, Mr. Curry. Councillor Bressie.
Thank you. I guess along those lines, I passed on a compliment to Director Manuel a couple weeks ago, and I don't know if it got to you, but that's the perception I hear in the community quite often. And I had an experience a few weeks ago where there was somebody very suspicious in my neighborhood, and I made a call to the non-emergency number just to highlight that. And even though I called non-emergency, there was an officer at my house in about 3 minutes. And when I shared that story on Facebook about how pleased I was to see that, I had 3 other community members come forward and say, hey, something similar happened to me. It was a non-emergency, and RCMP was on it very quickly. And I think I was very impressed. So were some of the residents I talked to. So I just want to make sure I pass on that compliment personally and publicly.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'll always take positive comments.
Thanks for that, Councillor Bressie, because there's lots of things we hear and they may not be actually accurate. So I appreciate that that life experience on that. So I see no other questions for Mr. Curry. I want to thank you for your presentation. And appreciate the data that you provide us with today and the update. And we will move on to Preben Bosson with our fire update, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll present a brief update on what Actions Fire Department has taken here over the last or the second quarter of the year. One big project we're currently working on is the CAD upgrade. We have been able to continue with that project in spite of COVID. The team has been able to overcome challenges to stay on schedule. So currently we are doing data entry and dispatch protocols. So due to the fact that we dispatch for over 60 fire departments, in essence, there are 60 different sets of protocols that needs to be entered. So if you do get a call for a structure fire in the city of Grande Prairie, would have a protocol that would outline exactly which units would be dispatched. And so with high level and manning, all the outlying areas. So it's fairly time consuming. However, the dividends comes once we are up and running, because then the CAD, the computer-aided dispatch, will in essence notify those units automatically, so our dispatchers don't have to look through a binder and figure out which unit to send. In my report, it says we are hoping to be on the platform at the end of Q1 21. The latest update is we are now tracking into April of 21 before we'll be switched over. In addition to that, Deputy Chief Grant is currently working on updating our standard operating procedures to better align with our current practices. He's working very closely with our platoon chief group to finalize this project by the end of 2020. This update is closely linked to our maintenance trading program that has been developed and will be implemented at the same time. The change in the standard operating procedures is sort of completing the implementation of a new incident command system that we brought on board probably about 5 years ago. So now we're kind of going through all the documents to make sure everything is aligned with that program. To help us track training and assign training assignments, we have brought in Target Solution as a software program. It'll take care of assignments, record keeping, and we can also use that for managing our updated standard operating procedures. In addition, we have received some interest from our agencies in terms of dispatching from our 911 center. So we're currently following up on those leads, and we're over time hoping to attract additional business to our 911 center. With the upgrades we are doing, we feel we'll be in a very good position to take on additional work, and we are actively sort of pursuing those leads. And finally, I have submitted some stats for the Q2, and I must apologize, there's some errors in the stats, and I would like to ask Council to emit year-to-date numbers for 2018 and 2019, and also emit fire responses for 2020. When we compiled the numbers, there was an error in adding those numbers, and I would like to point that out to Council. Other than that, I would just like to highlight in the stats, if you look at our medical co-responses for 2020, of course, are way down. What we did, we basically opted out of our medical co-response program with the exception of the most absolute severe type of calls because of COVID. We are now reversing back into the program, and you'll see our numbers will start to increase as we move forward. So that's basically it for my overview, and I'll certainly be available to any questions.
Thank you for that, Chief Boston. Any questions? Councillor Bressie.
Thank you. It's interesting I know that medical co-response is actually always a conversation with municipalities when it comes to service levels for fire. And I'm kind of curious, was there any talk with HS or any data captured in terms of what that did to response time in our community, what that did for outcomes? Is there any way we could get at that, where it seems that we just accidentally, well, not accidentally, but we were forced to run an experiment in a decreased service level? And I'm curious how we could get at if that actually had severely negative outcomes for our community.
So, Mr. Chair, thanks for that question. And we do not have any stats currently, but during this period, we're in very close contact with the coordinator for the from our program. And they also noticed a downward trend in their number of calls, so they were able to still maintain a good level of service. But it's certainly an interesting question that I think would be appropriate to ask following this, and kind of monitor how they cope, I guess, without that level of support from us. And certainly from my point of view, I always look at this program area as a bit of a fine line to balance. So Alberta Health Services obviously provide the medical service. We do augment that service when we co-respond with them. But there's a fine line between us providing that extra level of care to our residents and visitors in the city to where we, in essence, do the job of Alberta Health Services. So I'm very much aware of that line, and we're sort of trying to navigate that. And you might recall that earlier this year, late last year, we actually did reduce the number of medical calls we attended to, based on that concept that it's Alberta Health Services' job to provide the service, and we simply enhance the service for our citizens.
Are you satisfied with that, Councillor Bressie, or do you have any follow-up?
Well, yeah, I'm satisfied for it now, but I definitely think that that's something that should be on our radar, and we should be. I think that I'd personally love to see us put some administrative effort into seeing if we can figure out what that did to our community. Also, if there were any savings. So I'm not on this committee, but that might be worth further work on.
Any other questions, Councillor O'Toole?
Yeah, Fire Chief, I just had a couple questions here. COVID-19's been a big issue the last 6 months. How did the fire department deal with it, or did you have any serious changes that you would have to make with shift work and management of the staff?
Thank you. I'm through the chair. So we put some restrictions in place. So we do screen all staff that report to work to ensure that they don't come to work sick. We kind of form cohort groups, so a crew could work together, but not mingle with other crews. We have very specific guidelines around crew changes, so we didn't sit in the coffee room and visit with the night shift when they were going off, vice versa. And we were very cautious when we did go on calls that we would not send a whole crew in to attend to one patient unless it was needed. So we did put some guidelines in place around that. And of course, the whole logistics of supplying protective gear for our staff and ensure our supply lines stayed open, because obviously all of a sudden there was a big demand on masks and gowns and gloves and whatnot. And we're still seeing that demand and still having some challenges getting supplies. I trust that answered the question.
Well, it sounds like you had a good hold on what you were doing there, and I'm glad to see that there was no cases from the fire department that I'm aware of in the Grande Prairie, so thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Councillor Tu. I guess I have one question, and then I'll look for motions after that. So I have a question regarding when we're talking about calls or co-responses. Do we have it specific around the area? And I'm thinking specifically around vulnerable people, the vulnerable population in the downtown core. I'm wondering, do we track those hours or those calls separately, or are they under the same line item?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we do not track those type of calls specifically. Our medical calls would be tracked based on the dispatch determinant. So it sort of depends on how serious the call is. When the call comes into dispatch, they assign it a determinant. So we could break it out and say we had 17 of these types of calls or 4 of these types of calls. But we do not break it down kind of specifically to that area.
Okay, thank you for that. And I guess maybe a question for Director Manuel as I'm thinking about that. We probably, am I safe to assume that we probably don't have the similar process in place for bylaw and RCMP, that we wouldn't track specifically the types of service calls?
Correct. I mean, we'll track them on an individual basis, but one of the determinants or demographic things that we track isn't specific to street engagement or homelessness.
Okay, thank you for that. So I will look for some motions if there's any. Mayor Given?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. So I appreciate we probably need a motion to receive all of the reports for information, but specifically on the medical correspondence, that is a pretty big change to the city's approach to emergency services. And I also had sort of wondered about, so what does that mean when we change a service level like that? So I'm going to make this motion. I'd move the committee direct administration, bring back a report identifying impact and outcomes from the changes in the city's participation in medical co-response, period. So it is somewhat broad, but what we're looking for is not, obviously we'd have a little bit of background about what has changed, but really more the focus is, so what happened because of that? And there probably is a financial aspect to it in terms of, did it save the city any money to do less calls? And that part is probably easy to quantify. The other part that I'm also interested in, maybe more difficult to quantify about, so what did that mean in terms of response times or health outcomes for people? And I appreciate that that may be challenging for administration to work up. I have confidence that you could, but I think it's really, really important on a service level like this. We're not talking about the length of the grass. We're talking about response in emergency situations and people's health. And so I think if it takes us some resources to figure out what happened when we changed that service level, then I think for me, I would be comfortable with that, some investment of resources to do that. And this would allow us to understand whether, whether that had any negative outcomes or whether it was neutral. It's completely possible that the community is well served by other providers and that this service didn't have any negative outcomes, and that would be good to know. But certainly if it did have any negative outcomes, I think we'd all like to understand that so we can really decide whether, whether that change is something we'd want to continue with. So that's my motion and the reason behind it.
Thank you for that. So you were making just that motion. We'll circle back to a request for information on another subsequent motion. Okay. Any discussion or debate on that motion? Okay. Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? And that carries unanimously. Thanks for that. Any further motions?
While I've got my mic on, Chair, I'll move that we receive the 3 quarterly reports for information.
Okay. Any discussion on that? So we'll call that. All in favor? And that again carries unanimously. I do want to add, and as I can't make a motion, I'm just wondering if anybody else would have an appetite or would want a motion. But I think for me, I would certainly like to see us start breaking out our calls specifically around the vulnerable people in our downtown core. I do think we spend an incredible amount of effort and time on that. And as an advocacy position, as Councillor Bresson mentioned earlier, I think we need to start quantifying that. Personally, I'd like to see us start breaking that out so we could quantify it, because if there isn't a higher substantial cost, because we are dedicating a lot of our policing and bylaw and fire to that, I think I'd like to know. I think it's an important thing for us to see for trending as well. So maybe I'm the only one that has that appetite, but I would, if not, I would hope that somebody else in the committee can make that motion for me, please. Councillor O'Toole and Mayor Given. Sorry.
Yeah, Mike, thank you very much. My concern is, do you want to have all the types of calls recorded? So motor vehicle accident, fire call, and also just an ambulance assistance? Or do you want to have it specifically for the vulnerable sector?
I think for me, my intent was be specifically as we're trying to work and engage with the vulnerable population would be around that. As I do think, I guess I get a lot of calls from community that are frustrated with how much time they see put into that. I think that's part of us running a proper community, but I do think analytically we should know how much hours and time if we're hiring 5 more police officers just to deal with vulnerable people. Then I would like to know that, because on an advocacy position, that's money that I would certainly like to be going back to the province and asking them for a little bit of a share in that. Councillor or Mayor Given, and then Councillor Bressy.
Yeah, I guess mine was a bit of a question for Chief Boss, and just wondering, what ability we have to get that kind of information about sort of the type of individual that was responded to. I'm not sure. I don't know whether we record that or not, and so Chief Boss, that's one question: is is that information that's available? And if not, would it be possible to look at sort of volume of calls by geographic area? That might be another way to look at it too, because it would be interesting to know whether there are other geographic areas in the city that also have a high level of call volume. So you can kind of look at it 2 different ways. Is it by area, or is it by user, I guess? And I don't know whether we collect what I'd call user data. Chief Boston, do you have any sense of that?
So, Mr. Chair, it would be difficult to track by user, and sometimes I think you would probably have to make a conclusion as to the status of that person. However, geographically, we actually are looking at that with the new CAD upgrade, that we can break down to our calls kind of within neighborhoods or specific areas. And I trust that would be a better way of tracking, and that would give us a very good sense for kind of call volume into certain areas. I think that one would be fairly easy. I think tracking by person would be more difficult.
Just a follow-up question with that, because I think I like where Mayor Given's going with that, because I do think it's nice to have the analytics, but if they're not possible to get, I'm just wondering if Director Manuel would have any idea if that would also work for our CMP and bylaw if we looked at tracking it by area.
So I can confirm we already track geographically both for enforcement and the RCMP. So we know specifically where incidents occur. Like you said, though, we do not specify whether they're street engaged or not outside of narrative.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Bressy?
Yeah, and it's just especially when we just talked about inclusion, I want to be really careful when we're talking about capturing this data in terms of there's that when you collect information about a system, you always impact that system. And I know there's been issues in other communities with carding's the most public one, but I really want to make sure we're not getting into a point where we're asking our emergency services people to make an assumption about people based on what they see, because that opens all kinds of inadvertent actions around all of a sudden what are they profiling based on things like that. So I really get where you're going with this. I really want to quantify. I really do think it is important for us to quantify the impacts of, frankly, the province dropping the ball in mental health and addictions care. I think has huge expenses for our city, and I think it disproportionately affects Grande Prairie compared to other municipalities. So I really would love us to quantify that, but just let's have this with an inclusion lens and make sure we don't inadvertently create exclusionary, frankly, racist systems that have been created in other cities with all well intentions. But so let's just be really careful with this as we're talking about it.
No, very, very fair point, Councillor Bressy. Appreciate that. Mayor Given?
There may be a way for us to start to get a better sense of this. I appreciate administration starting to bring quarterly reports. It's very helpful for us to get a sense of trends over time. that should be our job as council members, I think, to be looking at, what's happening over time and what areas of the city. It might be helpful if administration, where the data exists, could start to present it in graphic form. The province on the opioid side does do heat maps that sort of show where there are the most opioid deaths. And I just use that as an example of where they've used geographic data and put it on a map to help you understand not specific pinpoints, but areas and intensity of utilization of service over areas. So maybe for future quarterly reports, if possible, administration could present us with some maps showing volume of response from enforcement services across the city, or volume of response from the fire department in areas across the city. Like that sort of map would start to help us get a bit of a sense of, we based on what we see with our eyes and what we hear, and we have a sense of where the calls are. I don't know whether or not the data actually backs that up, and it would be interesting to see that these numbers represented geographically across the city. So that could be advice to administration that would start to get us some of the info that we're looking for.
I like that. Thanks, Mayor Gibbon. Councillor O'Toole.
Yeah, when I asked you the first question, what you were trying to get at, I was concerned about the same issues that are at the table now. And I do really like the idea of a heat map, and that way we can have different concerns on that map regarding the issues. So I'm supportive of that, and I don't know if we need to make a motion on that. I think administration might be hearing this conversation, so if they've got any thing to discuss over it, or if they are able to make that happen, I'd like to hear from them. Thank you.
Anybody from administration want to jump on that one?
I can't speak specifically to fire, but for the RCMP and enforcement services, I know we can generate heat maps.
Okay, thank you for that. So I don't know if we need any specific motions. I think this was more of a conversation. Hopefully, as Mayor Gibbon alluded to, we are, the quarterly updates are welcomed, and I think there's an evolution piece here that we're all hoping for. And I think that we just have to be careful that we can get the right data and we're not doing it in a wrongful way by any means. So with that, I think we've got the motions we need to accept the quarterly reports. So I want to thank Kelly and Sean and Preben for their reports. Much appreciated, and looking forward to more conversations about these in the future. With that, we'll move on to item 1.5 with our crime mitigation grants, and we'll look for Wendy Hughes to report on that, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Palat. I'm here today to bring forward to committee funding recommendations related to the crime mitigation grant pilot project. The purpose of the project is to provide limited funding for projects that have the likelihood to reduce specific crime-related concerns by residents, businesses, and organizations within the city of Grande Prairie. Applications were reviewed by a cross-functional committee comprised of representatives from RCMP, enforcement, health and safety, and the Protective and Social Services Director's Office. The committee evaluated each proposal utilizing a matrix as outlined in this report. Internal engagement, as well as a number of site visits and discussions with the applications were conducted. The matrix considerations are as follows. A validated crime or social disorder concern exists or is likely to exist. A review of what measures the applicant or city has taken to date. The extent of the impact being experienced by the applicant, the cost of the proposal, and whether the applicant should have a financial contribution, and the likelihood the proposal will achieve the desired result, alternatives to the proposal, and the amount of the grant funds available. Administration received 26 applications with a total request of approximately $175,000 collectively. 80% of the applications were from businesses and organizations located in the downtown core. An overwhelming concern of the applications were related to activities occurring in alleyways and alcoves and involving street-engaged population using intoxicating substances causing property damage and leaving garbage and drug paraphernalia. The remedies sought largely focused on full-scale security camera systems and, in some cases, additional lighting. However, the allocated budget cannot fully support many of these requests in their entirety. So alternatively, a couple of the applications proposed a more basic and cost-effective solution, which involved an all-in-one technology which combines video, lighting, motion detection, app notification, and two-way communications into a single piece of hardware. Committee acknowledged that this may be a basic solution for many of the applicants' concerns, and one in which many of the applicants could be financially supported. As a result of the evaluation, 18 proposals were identified as meeting matrix considerations. Appendix A outlines those recommendations. If approved, administration will contact all applicants, both successful and unsuccessful, to provide a summary of the evaluation, alternatives and suggestions, and an update on what other measures are taking place to address concerns such as the mobile outreach program. Therefore, administration is recommending that committee approve the crime mitigation grant allocation as presented in Appendix A. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Ms. Hughes. Any questions from council? Councillor O'Toole?
I'm sure there was some discussion during allocating those funds. Looks like you've got it down to a fine art where you know what works best and what maybe doesn't. And so with that, if there is nobody wanting to make a motion or no other comments, I would make the motion that committee recommend that the Protective and Social Services Committee approve the recommendation for the crime mitigation grant allocation recommendations as presented in Appendix A.
Okay.
And bring it forward to council.
Okay, thanks for that, Councillor O'Toole. I see Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Chair Palat. I just had a question for Ms. Hughes here. In regards to the number one proponent, the Landsman property, I imagine that's Aberdeen Centre, and the security fencing to go around for our funding at $10,000. The question in regards to that is, with the development going on right next door, is there the chance that any of that could be a throwaway funding, like just temporary until the development on the Fletcher building gets going?
So that was one of the considerations. However, when we looked at the Landsman property, it was determined that they are a high need application in that they see a lot of increased activity that wouldn't normally take place in a business environment.
Mm-hmm. So at $10,000, how is that going to surround like 2 parts of their building, 3 parts of their building? How do they propose that to work? Like, is it just cutting off access to the alleyway for people walking through, or?
I can respond to that. So through the chair, I have had discussions with Landsman and confirmed that we don't believe that this would be throwaway, in that it is actually running adjacent to what would be the laneway, which will have to be maintained regardless of the development at the former Helmut Fletcher building. It is intended to provide fencing that runs along the north side and the west side. No, sorry, north side and the east side of the property right now. They had existing fencing that was consistently vandalized. So this is a high security fence, such as that bolt cutters and stuff will not damage this fence. There was a great deal of concern about users of the supervised consumption services site bypassing, parking in their lot, and I guess, traffic proceeding through where this fence is now in place. So the fence has actually been installed while they were waiting for the grant. So this would be a reimbursement of some of the expenses.
Okay, and none of it will be throwaway?
No.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Thiessen, any other conversation, or Councillor Clayton?
Thanks, Chair Plot. Thanks for the presentation and the information. I was curious on, there's $0 left. However, I was curious if there's a timeline for the successful candidates to execute their safety measures. And if not, then I'm assuming the money will come back and we'll open it up again. I don't know. I'm just curious the timeline and what happens if they don't execute as they've applied for.
Certainly, I can tackle that one as well. So the intent was to essentially afford the funding as projects are completed. And if the project is not completed by the end of the year, we would ask that the applicants submit a case as to why they would require an extension. But if that fails to transpire, we would expect that the money, we'd come forward to committee with a recommendation on how to proceed at that point.
Perfect, thank you.
Thanks for that. I guess just a comment or a conversation for me is this was a fund, I think, through budget last year we allocated specifically for this. Seems like we're getting a lot of uptake on it, and so it's just something maybe we want to consider looking at a budget like this moving forward. I believe in the past the city had an allocated fund for this, but seeing how there's been such an uptake on it, it's maybe something we should be chatting about a budget or subsequently after this. So anyways, we do have a motion on the table. I'm not seeing any other hands going up, so I'll call for the question. All in favor? With that, that's unanimous, and that passes. Thank you for the report, Ms. Hughes, on that, and Mr. Manuel for your support on that. From there, we will move on to item 1.6, the Vehicle for Hire Stakeholder Engagement Update, and I'll look for Sean Hebert on that, please.
So I'm going to have to step in for Sean. Unfortunately, he's unavailable to attend the meeting, but I am familiar with the matter, so I'll move it forward for us today. So what you have in front of you is an update on some stakeholder engagement that is actually fairly dated now. We'll speak to that in the presentation. But late last year, or fall of 2019, administration was seeking feedback on a draft vehicle for hire bylaw that's going to see the vehicle for hire provisions removed from the business license bylaw, which is under review and public consultation at the moment itself, and form its own bylaw, just because it's such a large portion of the business license bylaw and so specific to one industry. So as part of that, the draft bylaw was circulated to our taxi companies, brokers, drivers, the limousine brokers, drivers, ride shares, and a presently unregulated group, which is the designated driving services. And designated driving services are frankly the newest comers, I guess, to the vehicle for hire industry at a large commercial level anyways. And as such, they also provided the greatest feedback. So in, I believe, September of last year, Mr. Hebert held 5 sessions where he solicited feedback from various industry participants, and 19 out of the 20 were designated driving services. And that ultimately triggered a delegation to appear before council, I believe in February of this year. And they brought forward some of the concerns they had. So Mr. Hebert summarized what some of the stakeholder feedback they received was, and it was all centered around the designated driving industry. And in large part, I think many of those concerns are addressed just through clarity of the language in the bylaw, some of the terminology that you have to use from a legal perspective sometimes requires a little bit of clarity in layman's terms. And additionally, some of the intent of some of the sections. So I'll just highlight a few of the concerns that were raised. So one was what's called street hailing. And this is something that is commonly across the industry restricted to being available to just taxi drivers. So this is where a person stands on the corner. You can think of the city of New York, for instance. A cab goes by, top light on, and a person stands outside and flags down a vehicle to jump in and take a ride. So this bylaw and our previous bylaw restricts that activity to marked taxi cabs with top lights. And that's primarily done from a safety perspective, in that, you know, if Ubers were just accepting people without the app and the prearranged service, just to flag any vehicle down, it'd be very difficult to tell if a vehicle that was up to some nefarious intent had picked up some unexpected passenger. So because ride shares and frankly, ride shares, limousines, and ride shares, designated drivers, and limousines don't have the same vehicle marking requirements or that taxis have, it was deemed reasonable to limit that restriction so only that these marked taxis with the top. Being said, there was some misconception that that would prevent a service such as a limousine or a designated driver from having a stand, for instance, at a local bar where people could approach them to arrange services. That's not what we're looking to restrict. What we're looking to restrict is the actual hailing of a vehicle while a person's walking down the street. If they call and arrange a pickup, that's no problem. It's just as a vehicle drives by. There was concern that the designated driving support vehicle, so the one that doesn't transport passengers, would be required to have a chauffeur's permit, which involves a class 4, 1 or 2 driver's license. We can confirm that that is not a requirement. As long as they're just transporting their coworker and they're not transporting passengers, we don't have a position on it, and we're not inclined to license or inspect the vehicle that is being used as the chase vehicle. A designated driver that is transporting passengers in the customer's own vehicle is for hire, and provincially, not even municipally, provincially does require a class 4, 1 or 2 license. So we are providing that clarification. And that really kind of highlights the issues that were raised. At this point, though, this is dated stakeholder information, and administration does believe it prudent that we go to the next step where we engage both the public and the industry itself in completing some surveys and additional engagement tools. So we're in a position to move this forward in conjunction with the business license bylaw to hopefully soon, early next year, have legislation that's specific to both industries modernized and these processes concluded, as they've been going on for quite some time now.
Thank you for that, Director Manuel. Any questions for Director Manuel around this one, or would anybody like to entertain a motion on this one? Mayor Gibbon?
Yeah, thank Director Manuel for the report, and I'd move we receive it for information.
Okay. Thank you for that. Seeing no hands going up, all in favor? And that passes unanimously. Thanks for that, Director Manuel. And with that, I guess we'll go back to you one last time to go through our outstanding items list, please.
Okay, so in regard to the outstanding items, I'd say at this point, everything remains on track. I suppose we can remove the vehicle for hire request that's on there right now, but understand that administration does intend to come forward probably by sometime in October with updated stakeholder information.
Okay. Thank you for that. So look for a motion to accept the outstanding item list. Councillor O'Toole. Sorry.
Item 1100 in the, it's supposed to be expected date was today. We moving that forward or taking it off the list?
Director Manuel?
I would suggest we take it off the list, as I believe we met the intent of updating what the previous stakeholder information was, but I do commit if, I don't believe a motion is necessary, but if council prefers, we could certainly make one in regard to the move forward and us bringing forward the public consultation.
Okay. I'll just leave it and take it off the list. So I'll move that committee accept the outstanding item list with the deletions. 1100 and 1072.
Thank you for that, Councillor O'Toole. Seeing no hands going up, I'll call that question. All in favor? That also carries unanimously after waiting for Councillor Thiessen to get his paw up there. So thank you for that. And with that, that ends the Protective and Social Services agenda. And we'll turn it over to Councillor Minhoff. We'll take a 2-minute break maybe here while we get reset up. And Councillor Minhoff with the Corporate Services agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Will Given. So my mic is on now. We're starting the Cooperative Service Committee agenda today for September 15. And time is about 1:20 almost. So first item is where Eunice is missing, right, today? Yeah. Okay, so let's start it with the item number 101. This is our Director Service Area Update Verbal. It's Shane Brook, my favorite one.
Thank you, Chairman Haas. From Assessment and Taxation, they're working with property owners who have multiple years of outstanding taxes to see if payment arrangements can be made before they complete the tax sale report. I'd note that any 2020 outstanding taxes wouldn't impact this. This would be people who are in arrears from many years ago. From Finance, we'll have a budget update at the next committee meeting where we'll give a state of our plan for the budget coming up in November. Human Resources and Health and Safety, they have just formalized our COVID rapid response plan. So that's a plan that we have in place should a case in one of our facilities be confirmed. And key to that is really working with Alberta Health Services and some contact tracing to keep operations going, but to make sure that our employees and people using our facilities are safe. We've had a plan in place since the beginning of COVID. We've now just formalized into a written plan. Corporate Efficiency has submitted the application for 311, and so that'll take about 6 months, and we'll have some more details on the rollout of that as we get into the new year. I'd also just committed to update on the chamber and having full participation. The temporary measures have been working, but we are making some really good progress on the engineered solution to return the chamber back to some more normal use here in the next week or two, so that you'll see some changes the next time you come into the chamber next week. And that's all I have for an update.
Thank you very much, Shane. And any question on update? I do have one. How you, for the tax recovery, how we are doing compared to year before this time?
We at the deadline, so the day following the deadline, we're about where we normally would for tax and arrears after a usual deadline in June. So we haven't seen any unusual increase in people in tax arrears. We'll have a more formal update with some specific numbers coming up, but at this early stage, we haven't seen anything that has specifically alarmed us on the macro scale.
Thank you. So we don't need the motion on this one, right? All right, thank you. Let's move into 1.2, Municipal Simulate Program MS Capital Plan. Daniel, your turn.
Thank you, Chairman Haas. So today we're recommending that committee recommend council approve the proposed capital projects to be funded from the municipal stimulus program as presented. So a little bit of background, the province announced a capital stimulus program for municipalities. The city of Grande Prairie was allocated $8.2 million of this stimulus. There are specific requirements outlined by the province for use of this funding, so that it must be determined by October 1st of this year. Any project submitted may not increase municipal taxes. It cannot be used for funding for projects that were already previously approved and must be fully spent by December 31st of 2021. They would accept a maximum of 5 projects, and they did provide some specific guidelines as to what was eligible and ineligible. So administration reviewed all 2021 capital projects that had been proposed by departments, as well as any shovel-ready projects that they may have had. When deciding on the proposed projects, those chosen were determined to best meet the criteria stated by the province, just to mitigate the risk of not receiving the full funding allocation. So on that, there was 5 projects that you have presented in front of you today, and they're detailed in the Appendix 1. No alternatives to these projects were provided, as there is risk and delay in approval of the proposed plan. This could result in funding loss if we're submitted later than the October 1st deadline. So this additional money was announced in July of 2020 and was of course not included in the original plan for the year. This is additional funding that will allow the city to do more capital than originally anticipated. The project submitted will not affect the operating budget of the city. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Any question for Daniel on this? Dylan?
Great, thank you. In terms of the South Bear building, I really love looking for home for technical search and rescue. I know that's been a puzzle piece we've been trying to figure out for a while, so I was excited to see that. I'm just curious, has there been any conversation with technical search and rescue about if this location works for them yet, or how have they been engaged in this process?
Daniel?
Maybe I'll take Daniel off the hot seat for that one. There will be engagement with technical search and rescue, although we did have discussions with them back 3 years ago, and the main concern that they had at the time was having a location that they had access to 24/7. I know that they had considered other options of relocating in the past, and they have had offers from other companies to provide them with space in their industrial buildings, but usually the challenge came to access, where they wouldn't be able to have access to the gate 24/7. It would be reliant upon someone else coming. So the main concern that they conveyed to us at the time was access, but we'll certainly have a discussion with them about this location should we choose to sell off the current or the former fire hall site downtown.
And then, sorry, if I may ask a few more questions about that. And then also just looking at this for technical search rescue, I know a need that they've got is a location to do training and also to do some of their office work. And would the space be capable of having a microwave, having a coffee machine, having a computer, letting them do some of that operational work? Or is the plan it's just strictly a storage location?
Thank you, Chair Bressi. At this time, it would be a storage location only, but it's something that we could discuss with them to ensure that we have perhaps plumbing available or some electrical outlets in the bay that they would occupy.
Right. And then just an idea for administration in terms of they really are a regional service, and this would be just the city funding their building, which I get the need to do it just city participation in terms of the timeline on this grant. An idea for administration, I have no idea how practical it might be, but even if it was designed in such a way that maybe there's potential to add on space, and if they wanted to, maybe they could go after other municipalities to help fund a training or office space. I don't know what the design of this building will look like, but just an idea I'd love us to think through what are the opportunities after we spend our grant money to allow other municipalities to participate in a way that won't compromise us getting the fast turnaround we need to get on this.
I think we can certainly take that design into consideration so that if there was funding or desire to expand the facility at some point in the future, that the site plan would allow that to happen.
Wade? Thanks, Chairman Haas. Just a couple questions on this one. On the crosswalk improvements for 200,000, can I just get a sense of how many crosswalks that could do if we're looking at beacons and lights? Is that enough to do? Are they $50,000 a go or $100,000 a go, just so I can have an idea of how many of these we could potentially do?
Thank you, Chairman. So in this case, kind of order of magnitude would on just the flashing beacons, similar to what you see in your package, and those are the ones over by City Hall. Those are in the magnitude of $10,000 for a set of those to go up. When you get into the overhead ones, more similar to what you see at 105th Street and 100th Avenue, so that's right beside the Tim Hortons, those could get into the neighborhood of closer to $100,000 because you're getting into what is considered to be a bridge, and there's significantly higher standards when installing those types of flashing beacons, overhead flashing lights.
Okay, so can I just get a sense of which areas specifically we're to do and how many areas, or is this still just we're going to kind of do them as we can?
I'm just seeing if Christine is still on the line or not. But I know that the one of them that we're looking to do is the overhead beacons at 102nd Street and 104th Avenue. So again, to use very rough numbers, you're at $100,000 for that set, which would allow us to do 10 sets of the flashing beacons elsewhere in the city. So we'd be looking at, say, 11 as a rough estimate of how many locations.
Thank you.
Okay, Horacio, you go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Just to clarify a bit, we have a rolling list with different locations when we receive complaints, and we do monitoring as well for pedestrian crossings, and the warrant number. So I think engineering will be using that list as a foundation to identify potential locations. And I think the range I can give you, as Brian mentioned, is between 10 to 15 spots, considering the rapid flashing beacon, and some other improvements as well in the geometry of the crosswalk. But to have a rough number will be between 10 to 15 spots across the city. Thank you.
And if I can, thanks for that. That's great news. I think this is something that'll be good for the community for sure. My other question was around the $3.95 million for the road rehab, and I know we're not going to get specific into it, but would that be covering, we've had lots of conversation about improvements on 92nd Street at 72nd Ave and Countryside North. Would something like this be allocated to a project like that, or do we have an idea of where this $3.95 million would be going for road overlays and road rehab?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Haas. The answer to your question is no, it wouldn't be going towards projects like 92nd, but we have identified in the capital budget that we've already put together that we plan to have that included for deliberations this fall for those types of geometric improvements. What we're proposing in the road rehab here for 3.95 is for the local roads. So most of the road rehab you've seen us do over the last year or so is focused on, the major arterial roads and some of the collector roads like Crystal Ridge that we just started this week. This specifically will be the locals that are the ones that the majority of people live on in the city. So there'll be more residential projects associated with this, or potentially some of the other industrial roads that wouldn't be in the collector arterial network.
Okay, so thank you. So just so I can understand, so projects like the 92nd Street and 68th Ave, and potentially things like 68th Ave and Pinnacle and O'Brien, the intersection there, or 132nd Ave and Lakeland, those wouldn't be identified for this. Those would be specific. We'd have to come for budgets to ask about those areas being specifically done instead of just more road rehab.
Correct. And what we've proposed right now is that's not included in 3.95 for those geometric improvements that you're referencing in this case. So it's, most specifically being that 92nd left turn bay into Countryside North. Our plan was to address that through geometric improvements funded in the capital plan. Okay. Now, all of the projects you just referenced we're not proposing to do all of them in the capital plan next year, but we are proposing funding in order to do some of those projects over the next few years.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you, Brian. Any other question on update? I do have one on this. Thank you very much, Wade. You asked these questions, what I had in my mind. But these 3.9 million road these are, like you said, Pacific. We can use 5 projects. It was not come under like Kevin O'Toole had the recreation plant, like project work, something like that. We can't use that money on that type, or this money we're putting in, it probably in our future to road rehab to do that money will be surplus. We can use somewhere else in the future years, I wonder. Go ahead, Shane.
Thank you, Chairman Haas. Specific to the low-cost activity center, as a decision hadn't been made by council, we wouldn't have met the October 1st deadline. It also would have increased operational costs, which potentially would increase the tax base. So that was why that specific project was left off. We felt that these projects were things we were looking at doing anyway in future years, which then in future years frees up capital tax, which has no strings attached. So this really was getting to some of the core things we were doing.
Thank you, Shane. Update. So if no question, can you get a motion, please? Kavanaugh?
Thank you very much. I move the committee recommend council approve the proposed capital projects to be funded from the Municipal Stimulus Program, known as the MSP, as presented.
Motion on the table. Any question on it? No? Then all in favor? Motion carries unanimously. And now the next one is outstanding items, which is Shane, you're hooked on again.
Thank you, Chairman Haas. We've added 1111, the advocacy strategy, onto the outstanding items list. We've put a date it's currently in January. It's a placeholder here. I will come back with some more precise plan of how we're going to address that. But we wanted to at least get it on the outstanding items list. Item 1108, which is some more information on the reserve policy that was requested. We are on track for September 29th, so I would recommend that the outstanding items list has no changes and accept it as presented.
Thank you very much, Shane. Motion, Bill?
Yeah, thanks very much, Chairman Haas. I'll get on the score sheet. I'll move that motion that we received for information.
Thank you very much, Bill. His motion on the table. All in favor? Motion carries. With that, I think this is a short meeting again for us, but we got done.
Well done, Chairman Haas. Probably the most effective chairing of any meeting so far today.
Yeah. So the next one, Community Service Committee. That is, Eunice is not here. Somebody else had to take the chair, I guess. Yeah. You need a 2-minute break, and you need a
Good afternoon and welcome to the Community Services Committee meeting for September 15th. First up, under delegations, we had Grande Prairie Minor Soccer Association scheduled. However, we will need to reschedule that one to the next standing committee meeting. So administration will work with that organization to get that date confirmed. Under reports, item 2.1, Director Miller.
Thanks, Madam Chair.
So if I can, I'll just do my update then. I think Mr. Van Tassel should be back soon, hopefully. So I'll just start with CKC. And as of September 8th, we had a total of 679 monthly memberships sold. And we are working on a plan. It's a revised fall amenity and membership offerings for October to December. And we'll have a number of other options available for our clients. So we're excited about that. With the Twin Ice Arena, we had minor hockey tryouts were held August 28th to the 30th. And it was a lot of collaboration and teamwork between minor hockey administration and the CKC leadership team. And to ensure that we have a safe traffic flow system and also sanitation protocols that were put in place and were also complied with. And then with the Coca-Cola Center as well, we had 4 successful proponents submit, I guess, their proposals as to what they could do for the concession and the catering process there. And we're just in the final stages of reviewing those. And then with events and entertainment, with Revolution Place, we have a concert coming up on September 26th. That's in the afternoon. It will feature 3 local bands. Mickey Blue Shoes, McKindred, and also the Northbloods. And that'll be in the afternoon in the Helen Rice Plaza area. And then we have Buckwild PBR event is coming up on, it begins, well, we actually added an extra day on Thursday, October 1st. So this will also mean that there will be 3 one-hour PBR segments on TSN. And so both Revolution Place and also the city will be highlighted on those time slots. Then we have the Grande Prairie Women's Show coming up from October 16th until the 18th at Bose Center. And what we're putting in place there to comply with Alberta Health Services guidelines, it'll be a ticketed timed entry to the event, and it'll allow us to control the number of guests going through the venue throughout the event. I believe it's the 26th annual time we're hosting that. And then for facilities, just an update on the colored light or illumination project. Due to some COVID-related manufacturing delays, some of the components are back ordered, but are expected to arrive mid-October. And then the project should be finished by the end of October. And some exciting news for Dave Barr, working with corporate facility management and energy management. We submitted and were successful in receiving a grant from the Farm Credit Canada Agri-Spirit Fund. It's a total of $25,000. And we can use that towards a real ice water treatment system. And the real ice system is using cold water versus hot water, so it'll reduce energy costs. And apparently, you really can't tell the difference between the 2 methods. So we're excited to see, and we'll monitor what we can see in savings for that too. And then for fleet, they recently put the 3 new electric buses in service. And then also just an update on, I think Director Glavin mentioned it earlier as well, that I feel that Fleet has done a very good job for us this summer with the road repair equipment and the mowing equipment. And as a result, it's been in the bays or in the Fleet Department minimal amount of time. So the preventative programs that we have put in place are working well. And with sports development, wellness, and culture, the city is partnering with the Art Gallery and the Center of Creative Arts for the annual celebration of the Alberta Culture Days, which is September 25th to the 27th. And the city will be contributing creativity kits, which contain several art supplies and craft directions, and we'll provide that to the public. And then finally, with transit, we started a campaign to update all the information for our accessible transit clients, and just to get all their current details, see who our future clients will be, and also we're distributing a new user's guide. And I think council's aware, committee's aware that we received about 350,000 masks from the province. So by the end of this week, those masks will have been put into packages of 2 per package. So it took us about 3 to 4 weeks to accomplish that, but it was a huge task, but we're very well prepared for providing masks to our clients on the buses as well. And then accessible transit bus number 37, that's the bus that council graciously donated to PARDS. We delivered that on Friday. they're in the process of having it wrapped, and then they'll start using it for their clients. And on the part of the wrap is recognition for the donation from the city as well. And I'll share some photos of that with council in the future. And then just an update on ridership on the conventional system is sitting between 45 and 50% at the present time. That's my update, Madam Chair, unless there's any questions.
Sorry, any questions for Director Miller? Just looking. Nope. Okay, I had one. Thank you. In regards to transit and masks, can you remind me, is the expectation that the transit drivers will be wearing masks at all times?
I believe that is the expectation. They also have the shields on the buses, and we're just in the process of adding. We have a few more shields to install yet. There was a delay in the manufacturing process for that as well.
Great. Okay, thanks. I see no further questions. So, Director Miller, we're going to move on to outstanding items list.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So just we're on track with all the reports other than South Peace Regional Archives. Just there's been recent meetings on that with the Archives Board, and they have a proposal that they've asked us to consider. It's a little bit different, and it's along the same lines of what we were hoping for, but just an extended timeline. So to finalize the details to what we want to present back to committee, we would just like to move that one out to October 27th if we could. And other than that, there's no changes or no updates to the oil.
Great. Just look for a motion in regards to the outstanding items list. Councillor Plott.
Thanks, Chair Clayton. I'd make a motion that we accept the outstanding item list as amended.
Great. Call the motion. All those in favor? That is carried unanimously. And with that, I will adjourn the meeting. Thanks, everyone.